Welcome to Safe on Deck. For episode 12, I sat down with Captain Tim Kinsella at the Hellcat Hangar in Pensacola, Florida. Lucky was raised in Dublin, Ireland, and enlisted in the United States Navy in 1989, where he earned his Dolphins serving in the submarine force. After commissioning via the United States Naval Academy, Lucky flew the CH-46 Phrog for his first fleet tour, flying combat search and rescue and anti-submarine warfare missions around the globe. Among a plethora of other notable jobs, Lucky went on to work as the White House liaison to the Secretary of the Navy, as a division chief in the Joint Operations Directorate of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon, and as a defense planner for NATO at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Mons, Belgium. His final assignment was as commanding officer of Naval Air Station Pensacola, where he led the base and the community through a devastating terrorist attack, the COVID-19 global pandemic, and the aftermath of Hurricane Sally. After retiring from the Navy with over 33 years of distinguished service, Lucky was named director of the newly founded Center for Leadership at the University of West Florida College of Business. Thanks for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, Episode 12, with Captain Tim Kinsella. Enjoy. Lucky, I start almost all of these the exact same way, but you are the first person that when I ask, where were you born, I already know the answer, and I know it was not in the United States. So, Lucky, where were you born?
Well, no, actually, I'm a Paddy from East L.A., and that's...
Really?
Yeah, I was born in Los Angeles.
No way.
My parents, they both Irish. My dad's from Dublin, mother's from Wicklow, and they came over to the States separately in the 60s.
Okay.
And my dad had a pub in Los Angeles called Ireland's 32. And all the Irish folks in Van Nuys used to go there. So he met my mother there. And incidentally, just a couple of years ago, a relative of ours passed away, and so my dad went back there with my sister. And they popped into the pub, Ireland's 32, to see if it was still there. And recently, it was just voted as the #1 dive bar in Los Angeles, which I think nowadays is a good thing.
It is. That's quite the compliment.
But when he walked in, and this is, mind you, this is 50 years later. They left in 72, I think. He walked in and there's two old guys sitting at the end of the counter, and they'd look up and they go, "Is that Timmy? Oh, Timmy, man, where you been 50 years?" The same old two guys sitting there in the same spot drinking their beers, like cheers.
That's awesome.
But anyway, they met there. I was born, and they sold up shop and went back to Ireland, so I grew up in Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's where that perfect accent comes from. Yeah. How many years were you there?
Till I was just shy of my 18th birthday.
Okay. And then I'm guessing you made a pretty big life choice, join the Navy.
Yeah, my folks came back to the States when I was 15. The economy took a real bad downturn in Ireland. We had a pub over there. We lived upstairs from the pub. Just about lost everything in the economic downturn. So came over here to start over anew again. I finished off school in Ireland, did what they call a leaving certificate. Came over to go to college. I was going to go to college down in Miami, down in Barry University. But we just didn't have the money to go to college. So I started looking at other things and what else I was going to do. And my dad was out playing golf with some retired Air Force guy, and he comes home and he says, "Hey, what do you think about the Air Force Academy?" And he says, "What's that?" And he says, "I don't know. You go there, you learn how to fly planes, and they pay for your education." I says, "Geez, that sounds great." So the next day I go down to the Air Force recruiting station off of Southern Boulevard in West Palm Beach, and there's literally a line out the door. But next door to it is the Navy recruiting station, and there's nobody in there. So I walk in the door and I say, "Hey, do you fellas have a Navy Academy?" And they looked at me like, "Oh, we got a sucker here, man."
We got a live one.
Yeah, we do. But I got excited about it. They talked to me about doing different things, and I did pretty well in the ASVAB, and so they're like, "Hey, do you want to be a Navy SEAL?" And man, I could barely run a half a mile, never mind doing all the stuff they do. And I said, "I don't know if that's for me," but looked into submarines and ended up going submarines. I was excited about it with the intent of trying to get a commission, or not even a commission, just an education. Every year I applied for different programs, and the third 3.5 years in, I applied to the Academy again, and on my 21st birthday I got a nomination from the Secretary of the Navy. And I was delighted, great birthday present. I was on the USS Kentucky at the time. And then a couple of months later, I get a letter from the Academy saying, "Sorry, you've been turned down." because your high school transcripts and math scores, because I had an Irish high school transcript. So I was all pissed off. I said, you remember that scene on Major League when he says, "F you, Joe Boo, I do it myself." Well, it was kind of like that. It's like, "F you, Navy, I'm going to do it myself." So my division officer, a fellow named Brooks Clark, a wonderful guy, says, "No, you need to go to the Naval Academy." So I said, "Well, what can I do?" They said, "No." He said, "Well, what if we do an interview? Get an interview for you up there?" And I said, "They don't do interviews." He says, "I know, but what if we can get you one?" Well, okay. So somehow they got an interview for me, and I had just wrecked my car. I was stationed in Kings Bay, Georgia. So I rented this teal green Ford Mustang 5.0 convertible with a white top and white interior. Why, I don't know, but drove up there in my dress blues, went in the yard, went to Leahy Hall, and I go up to the front desk and a lady says, "Who are you?" And I says, "I'm here for an interview." She says, "An interview? Oh, you're that guy." So she sends me over to Michelson Hall over to talk to some math professor who was an exchange guy from the UK, from Dartmouth. And we talked about rugby and drinking pints, and he looked at my high school transcript. He's like, "You'll be fine." And then I go back over and I meet with this fellow named Captain Smith, who at the time I thought was a balding, fat captain, which is what people look at me like now. And we just chatted for about 15 minutes, and he says, "You know what, I think you're the type of kid we want to have come here." So he says, "How about I see you back in July?" And I couldn't believe it. It was like all my birthdays came at once. It was one of those seminal moments in my life, where it was life-changing.
Of course, yeah.
And I went to the academy, and I loved it. Loved it there.
Before we get to the academy, could you talk through what it was like being on a sub? Because I've never interviewed someone that's been under the water. As silly as that might sound, I know nothing about it. Yeah. What is that life like? I feel like it has to be so different from what your career ended up becoming.
Yeah, it is. So when I was on there, it was 6-hour watches. So your day is 18 hours. So 6 on, 12 off. But I was young, getting my Dolphins, so all those 12 hours are spent qualifying, getting my Dolphins and that. But if you think of it as you're under fluorescent lights all the time, you never look further than 20 feet in front of you. So you're focusing on things that are 20 feet in front of you all the time. Not seeing the light of day, it's odd. You don't know it, you don't really notice it. You're very much run by the routines of the submarine. The floor beneath you is I was on a boomer, but when you turn, the whole thing turns. More so than you're operating in 3 dimensions, more like flying, right? So you get used to it after a while. The camaraderie is really the thing I think that sets submarines apart. You're down there with 150 of your worst enemies or your best friends.
Depending on the day, I'm guessing.
Yeah, depending on the day. The pranks they play at each other are fairly vulgar, and
I've heard some stories. Yes,
but I think it's probably gotten better now since women have been on submarines.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too, for their sake.
Yeah, for everyone's sake.
But it was good people, good quality people. The thing I didn't like about submarines, especially being on a ballistic missile submarine, so a few listeners are the ones that fire the nuclear warheads, was that we were always practicing for something that we hoped we'd never do. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the idea of working all the time in the hope that you never got to do the skills that you were practicing for.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense.
I didn't go back submarines.
And I was going to ask, is that an option? I don't even know how it works at the Naval Academy, but could you have gone back?
Yes, actually, I had a interview. So to go submarines, you have to do an interview with the head of Naval Reactors, which is the organization that runs all the nuclear propulsion for the Navy. And that started back with Rick Over. Rick Over said, and it was one of his guarantees to Congress, that every officer that goes in the program would be personally interviewed by the head of Naval Reactors. And that's where all the stories from Rick Over comes from.
Legendary interviews.
The engineer in my sub, when he went, he was a cheerleader at the Naval Academy. So Rick Over made him do a cheer in front of him. My company officer at the Academy, Rick Over, said to him, "Piss me off." "Sir?" "Piss me off." So Rick Over had this beautiful model of the Nautilus right beside him. So he took up the Nautilus and he smashed it on the floor and it broke into small pieces. And so Rick Over's like, "Get the F out of here." But he still got into the program.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must have wanted the job.
Right. But so I had it's kind of a funny story. I got an interview to go and do it. And the thing is, once you get an interview, that morning, everyone goes up to Naval Reactors up in the Navy Yard. You go up there at the same time on a bus, and they put it was like a what do you call it? A production line. They just line you up, and you go through and you talk to them. So, but if you get on the bus, it means that you have to go submarines. There's no, you go up there, they accept you, and then you say, no, I'm not going to do it. Just getting on the bus means that you're agreeing to go subs. So that morning, I was still undecided. I didn't know. I honestly didn't know if it was SWO, aviation, or subs. So that morning, my alarm goes off. You had to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and get on the bus at 5:30. And the alarm goes off, and I hit the snooze, and I hit the snooze, and I hit the snooze. And then there's about 10 minutes left for me to get on the bus, and I just said, F this. I don't want to go submarines. What the hell am I thinking? I've seen how miserable those officers were and how hard they worked. I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy my life. I want to be, so in that moment, in that half slumber, I was like, I want to fly. I want to go and be an aviator. So that morning, I'm at muster, and my division officer, who's a submarine guy, comes out and he says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I decided not to go. And he read me the riot act for like an hour because I didn't get on the bus. But anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, long answer to your question.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, you could have.
Yes.
What was the academy like? Did the Navy, being enlisted in the Navy prepare you for the Naval Academy?
Honestly, I think I'm a product of an Irish boarding school in Dublin, very old, founded in 1669 by King Charles II himself, called the King's Hospital. I think that prepared me more than being enlisted did. Being enlisted helped prepare me for the games, the nonsense that you put up with. Being enlisted gave me a resilience, for sure. But living in close quarters, the camaraderie that you build, succeeding in an institution-like environment, I think boarding school really helped me with that. I had a hard time with the academics. I'd been out of school for 4 years. So, like my first grading period, I was, I think, a 1.6.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. But I didn't know how to study. I didn't.
Sure.
I'd been. But my classmates and my friends, they helped me, and the teachers there were just fantastic. As long as they see you're trying, they will not let you fail. They'll do everything that they can to keep you within the guidelines to make sure that you pass. But I loved it there. I really did.
At what point in the process, and I'm entirely unfamiliar because I was an OCS guy, at what point do you track select? I know we talked about that a moment ago, but when did you, obviously we know you went to be an aviator, but when was that decision made? At what point in your career?
It's your senior career. So it's the, if I can remember right, I think it's the beginning of the second semester. So up until that point, you do interviews with like the senior people from the community that would sit on a board, and you do a board with them. So I did a board with aviation. You also look at your grades and what your class rank is. So it's very much based on your class rank. So there's only 250 aviation spots, 200 marine spots, 50 submarine spots, right? So based on your class rank, you go down, and then you put your wish list in, and then after the interviews and all that, and then you find out, I think it's about February of your senior year before you graduate, what's going to happen. So it's like a big reveal. And then if you're an aviator, you get to pick your class date. You used to get a leather jacket and a pair of shades, but they
got rid of that.
Yeah, they got rid of it.
Wow. Okay, you get those when you get down here to Pensacola.
Yeah, now I think they give you a flight suit up there now.
Okay.
If you're a SWO, that's a surface warfare guide, then you get to, there's a big production over in Alumni Hall. That's the indoor sports arena, and they pull off. They go and they select the actual ship.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. They've tried to make the surface folks have a problem recruiting people because of their reputation. Some of it deserved, some not so deserved, but that's the perception. So they've tried to jazz it up a bit by making it more fun, picking the ship and the home port and all that stuff.
Sure. But you picked aviation.
I did.
You came down here to Pensacola.
Yeah, and that thing I said about not wanting to do a job that I always hoped I'd never do, or practicing for a job I hope I'd never do. Aviation, what really sold it for me, there was two things. First was it was the people. When I talked to SWOs, all the junior officers were, don't do it. You won't enjoy it. You won't like it. I don't like it. If you talk to the submariners, they were all getting out. They do their time. They said it was great. They loved driving the submarine, but they hated being back in the reactor. And they spent most of their time back in the reactor, so a lot of them got out. Aviators, to a person, talked about how much they loved it and the camaraderie and how they loved the physical act of flying. So their job, that's the bit they loved. And so I was, you know what? So that was the first thing, was the people, what the people said. And the second thing was the bit about loving doing their actual mission, the stuff that they were being trained to do. So I wanted to have the job satisfaction, and that was important to me. So I knew from very early on that I wanted to fly helicopters because I wanted to do search and rescue. Because again, there's a job satisfaction thing.
Absolutely.
For me. I wanted to train for something and feel good about it when I did it.
Cool. Well, so you already knew you wanted to go helicopters. You came down. Was it? And I'm always curious to ask because I know the programs have changed a little bit over the years. Was there I guess we'd call it knife now. It would have been IFS then. Was there any kind of flying in a general aviation airplane or any kind of basic aviation introduction?
Good God, no.
Nothing.
Absolutely
and nothing at the academy?
No.
So you came down here, you went through API, I'm guessing?
Yeah, API, yeah.
Okay. What was API like?
API, it was like a extension of the Naval Academy in a way because a lot of the same folks you're down there with. And then you'd look at these people called OCS graduates and these people called ROTC or OTC graduates. I'm like, who the hell are these people? And why are you invading our friendship groups here? Our little cliques, our Naval Academy cliques.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's funny because some of my best friends became OCS and ROTC folks that I became friends with in API and in the squadron and so forth. But API was, it was fun. I remember being full of rumor about, man, if you study this, you get this. If you say you want Corpus, then you have a better chance of getting jets. And if you go to Milton, then you're definitely going to get helicopters and all this nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's probably still the same rumors.
100%. Yes, different rumors, but the same general flow. None of it is right.
Yeah. I remember there being a lot of stress on the academics because they were very much using the NSS or the what's NSS stand for?
Naval Standardized Score, I think.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. Yeah.
So the score your grades.
Yes.
The grades would fluctuate on what the minimum was based on the pipeline and how many aviators they need because we all know the BUPers, the Bureau personnel, absolutely sucks at trying to figure out how many pilots they need per year. So once you're in the pipeline, API was the easiest place to cull folks out.
Absolutely.
So when I went through the T2 Buckeye, it had been red striped. So it means that it wasn't flying for the listeners out there. I can't remember what it was. Wing roots or something.
Okay. But the entire fleet is down.
The entire fleet's down.
Flying.
So now that was what, 50% of the fleet probably for the jet pipeline. So they couldn't, if you wanted to go jets, only the folks who were on the Commodore's list got jets. So you were going either multi-engine or you're going helicopters, and they didn't need as many, so they were raising the scores on the for what's required to get through API. And then folks were in, the pool for ages. So I remember that. I remember not liking Pensacola.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're allowed to say that, sir.
I know. Because...
Yeah, what was it? Do you remember specifically what it was about Pensacola?
So this was 96, and downtown Pensacola is not what it is today.
Okay.
I had been used to living in kind of an urban place. I was single. I was still fresh enough out of Ireland. Like I hadn't been in the States. I'd only been in the States for 8 years. 4 that was at Naval Academy. 4 was enlisted. So I was still, believe it or not, I was still sort of getting used to the American culture and American way of life, even though I'd been indoctrinated for 8 years in the Navy. And the American South is not a culture that I'd really gotten used to yet, that
Absolutely.
I understood.
No, totally fair.
So there was a culture shock when I first came over from Ireland, and then there was the culture shock of being in the South, coming from the North down to the South. I've since come to love it. And I'm raising my family here, of course, for a reason.
Yeah.
We love this town, and we love it because of the people and because of the culture here in Pensacola.
But it was still very new, and you were under a lot of stress.
Yeah, and I'm not a hunter. I'm not a fisherman. As a golfer, there was lots of good golf courses here then, and so I golfed my ass off. which is because I knew I was going to fly helicopters, so I was like, I don't care about scores.
A lot of good golf here, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think there was more golf courses open then than there are now.
Absolutely. Yeah, a couple have been shut down.
Yeah, like the Moors. And,
Yep.
which was sad to see.
Yeah. Okay, so where'd you go to primary?
I did primary in Corpus Christi.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Beautiful Corpus.
Corpus Christi, lived out on Padre Island, across the causeway there.
Okay.
With 2 classmates from the academy.
Okay.
I played a lot of golf on that goat track of a course there on the base.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the fairways were harder than the runways.
It's possible. It's a Navy base.
Yeah. What was it called? Gulf Winds or something like that.
That's great. What'd you fly? What was the primary trainer at the time?
It was a T-34 Charlie.
Okay. So that was your first flight in a GA, in a airplane. I'm not counting airliners.
Yeah.
Ever. Oh, my God. What was the first flight like for you?
Stressful yet sensory overload a bit. I'd been in a private plane maybe once before. Just a friend took me up. But I didn't. It was very foreign, very, very foreign to me. And something. So growing up in Ireland, I can't tell you how many times throughout my career, whether it was flying over southern Iraq or out in the South Pacific, or no matter where it is, when I'm just sitting there going, "What the hell am I doing here? How the hell did I get here?" And that first flight was kind of a moment like that. It's like, holy mother, God, what the hell am I doing here? But I loved it. The excitement I was so excited. My primary experience was not a very good one, though. No, I'll take that back. The first part, so the FAM flights, the familiarization flight phase, my on-wing went on extended leave. So he did the first flight with me and then went on leave. So I had a different instructor for every flight all the way up to FAM 13. So my FAM 13 check ride, I'd been with different guys. I was effed up like a football bat. I was a mess.
It's hard to learn. It's hard to learn when you don't have that continuity.
Yeah, and it was in spurts. I'd do 2 flights and I'd wait for 2 or 3 weeks and then I'd do a flight, and it was a mess. It was so anyway. My 13 check ride, I was flying with a guy named Wontrobsky, P3 pilot, and I was going up and down like I was porpoising multiple hundreds of feet trying to stay. I was a mess, and he was like, "What the hell are you doing up there?" I said, "Sir," I said, "What are you looking at?" I'm looking at the horizon, and he says, "Well, you know these things called instruments to help you out." I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "You see that thing there? There's a needle that goes up and down, and in the middle it's got a 0." And he says, "Yes, sir." He says, "You know what that is? The VSI." He says, "Yeah, try using that. Try." He said that thing called the attitude indicator. He says, "Yes, yeah, try using that. Try using it." And he changed my life. He said he went back. He should have given me a down. I would not have been hard done by if they would have booted me out of the program. I think I was so bad.
Wow.
Yeah. And he went back to student control and he says, "Hey man, this kid's been hard done by. I'd like to take him as my on-wing for 3 flights." And he took it to the skipper, and he convinced the skipper that it's the right thing to do because I'd kind of been screwed by the program. So, within 1 flight, he just told me some very basic things that you take for granted. And it changed everything. And then all of a sudden, I was rock solid and passed my FAM 13 check rides with 2 aboves.
Nice.
So it was
made a difference.
It's just a difference that all throughout my career there've been people who have made such a tremendous difference because they saw something in me and they believed in something, and we never do things. We never do it alone. There's always people around us that are lifting us up on their shoulders to reach heights that we didn't know that we were capable of. And I was really unhappy going through FAMs, and then he just took the time to care, and it made such a difference. And then from that moment on, I loved flying.
I can imagine. Yeah. It made a big difference.
Yeah, I'll never
no, please.
My first solo, I was laughing out loud in the cockpit, and I had always wanted to fly with the canopy open like World War II. So I was up at, 8,000 feet or something over there, the Gulf of Mexico. I was like, fuck, I'm going to do it. So I pulled it, and as I pulled it open, and the wind's rushing in, and I realized, oh shit, what if I can't get it closed again? But I did. I got it closed again. But it was so much fun. I'll never forget that moment, that first solo.
Yeah.
It was so great.
Impactful, for sure.
Yeah.
But you came back here for helicopters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm embarrassed to ask. It would have been the TH-57, right?
Yeah,
Bravo and Charlie,
thing,
same thing.
Yeah,
okay, same thing I did. Yeah, the mighty Sea Ranger, still flying out there today.
Yeah.
What was that first flight in the helicopter like, though? So different, I'm guessing, from a T-34.
Yeah, it's like learning to walk again. Really like learning to walk again. I'm not very good at learning from a book, but if you show me and I do it once or twice and then I get it pretty quickly and then I reinforce it with the book later on. So the thing that in flight training that I think was difficult for me is I hated studying and I hated getting in front of a book. So almost every flight, I'd be a little bit behind the aircraft, but I'd make the instructors laugh so I could get away with it. I mean,
this is a valid technique to anyone who's a student.
I had one instructor who, actually, it was one Tromsky. He used to make me do all my calls in a Sean Connery voice. So it would be, and our call sign was Ranger, VT-28.
Okay.
So it would be, I could be on like, Tower. This is Ranger 007. 5 miles to the west. Inbound, full stop. And so I had to do that everywhere.
Wow.
I remember one time I was there in helicopters. Somebody got wind of it, and so they made me do it. And it was like, cross city traffic. Single helicopter, 500 feet, 4 miles to the north. And they're like, can you say that again, please?
It's pretty good. That's actually a really spot-on accent.
But the helicopter, I started off a bit slow, but then once I got it, it was awesome, and I don't know, I just enjoyed it. It was fun. I wanted to fly the 46, I wanted to fly the Phrog again because of that job satisfaction bit. I love the idea of doing search and rescue and logistics. Actually, I like the idea of it because at the end of the day, you can say, I did this. I love the crew concept of it. I love the camaraderie of it. I want to live in San Diego. Well, my first choice was actually 53s out of Sigonella, just because I want to live in Sicily. I want to go.
I've heard a lot of people say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
HC4 is an interesting place. Many stories for another time.
Yeah.
But yes.
A lot of friends that flew out there. Actually, a good friend of mine was the XO and had a fatality. Very unfortunately.
Really.
Yeah. Wonderful guy. So I got my second choice, which was 46s out of San Diego. So I mustn't have done too bad if I got my second choice.
No, not at all. Yeah. Was that was that where people wanted to go? Where did people want to go?
Yeah, they did. Actually, it was 46s out of San Diego was probably the most competitive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
People, and this was it's my group, the folks I hung around with. Nobody wanted to fly Bravos, 60 Bravos.
Really?
Yeah. I think we just had a bad slew of instructors there that weren't fun people. Like one
came from that community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whereas the 46 guys that were there were awesome. They were great. One of them is Pat Everly, who's the director of the National Flight Academy here on the base now. Pat's probably actually the reason I went 46s. But I remember I was talking to one 60 Bravo guy, and I was like, well, why do you like flying 60s? And he says, well, if you think about it, the 60 Bravos are kind of like the F-18s of the helicopter community. I was like, get the fuck out of here. That's
awesome.
That's like comparing the mayor of Akron, Ohio with New York City.
Yeah, they're both mayors.
They're both mayors. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. I was like, okay, dude. Yeah, whatever. That's not what attracts me to it.
Sure.
What attracts me to it is the people, the mission,
Where was the FRS? Was it East or West Coast?
It was West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah. I had at that time there was 2 46 FRSs.
Okay.
One in Norfolk and one in San Diego.
Okay. And the primary missions that you said was search and rescue, and then VOD, vertical onboard delivery, cargo, packed cargo, secondary?
Well, it depended. So it's all expeditionary. So you'd go out in debts of 2 helicopters. And if you went on the amphib, your primary was search and rescue. You do EOD, search and rescue, very NVG heavy. A little bit of spec ops, but we were just dabbling in NSW at that time. Like there was no syllabus for it. There was nothing. It was just sort of
target of opportunity.
Yeah, very much just dabbling in it, and we're figuring out on the fly. We had just started to do turf stuff. Like the syllabus was in very, very early stages. So if you went out to support the Marine Expeditionary Units, the ARGs, amphibious ready groups, you were doing primarily search and rescue and a bit of NSW, Naval Special Warfare, and then of course doing all the vertical replenishment, and then or you would deploy on a supply ship.
Okay.
Which was the life of Riley.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the USNS Navy is very different from the USS Navy.
Yes. So I did 2.5 deployments. This was an HC-11 out of San Diego.
Okay.
And it was all on amphibs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So I never did any of the supply ships.
Gotcha. What was it like learning to fly the Phrog? How did it compare to the 57? Was it at all similar? I mean, it's a helicopter, but that's about it because it's two, tandem rotor, a little bit different mindset.
Yeah. You didn't have to worry about a tail rotor. It was, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. It was like, it looks unwieldy, it looks like a banana, but when you get into that aircraft, you really strap it on. And we used to say it was the last true stick and rudder aircraft in the whole Navy inventory, because you're very active on the pedals, very, very active, and the flight control system was almost non-existent. So flying the TH-57 Bravo was almost like the Phrog all the time.
Really?
So it was very intensive.
Yeah.
If you took your hands off the control, it would just start drifting. You were always. And it's funny when I went to the 60, I used to yell at the JOs all the time because they'd fly with their feet off the pedals and their hand, scratching their arse or whatever. And
getting a little bit lazy. Yeah.
So and I used to yell at them all the time. Because you don't know what's going to happen with the aircraft. You have no idea. Because I noticed that in the 60 community, because the flight control system was so good, that people would get lazy. They get lazy flying. They let the aircraft fly them instead of them flying the aircraft. And it's you could always tell a 46 pilot because they fly the aircraft. Not necessarily aggressive, just they make the aircraft do what they want it to do.
How was the aircraft health-wise in its lifespan? Because I want to say 2011, 2012, I remember seeing some HMX-1 birds, literally going out to the desert. But the Navy retired them a little before then. Was it?
That's right.
Was it issues with parts? Was it still a good solid machine, good player when you flew it?
So there had been known issues with the engine control system for quite some time. And the Navy had put NavAir had put quick fixes into it. The engines were underpowered a bit. The airframe was getting old. The head, you had to do a non-destructive inspection on the head every 10 hours.
How do you do that underway? Is it a pretty...
yeah, I mean, the guys...
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, they...
made it happen.
They made it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a very maintenance-intensive aircraft because they were getting old. I mean, this is on my first deployment. One of the pilots, he's reading a book called Bonnie Sue. It's about Marine Corps pilot talking about his time in Vietnam, and he flew Phrogs. And he wrote down the bureau number of all his aircraft. Yeah, exactly.
I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, that's the bureau number of one of the planes that we had on deployment. Wow. So we wrote him, and we said, "You won't believe this." And we wrote him when we were on deployment, and we get a letter back. And he says, "No, that's impossible." At Hue City, it was Khe Sanh. A Vietnamese, I think it was during the Tet Offensive, a Vietnamese mortar round, because they used to park their planes close to their tents. A mortar round landed right beside it and blew it in half. And he says, I saw it with my own eyes. And he said, if it is it, then you need to look under the chin bubble and you'll see bullet holes here, here, and here, and here, because he landed in a hot LZ, got shot up real bad. He got shot in the leg. His co-pilot got shot in the belly. Gunner got shot up. So we look in the logbook, and sure enough, the front of the aircraft got put back together with the back of another aircraft. And that helicopter used to leak like a sieve from the transmission all the time, right where the generator sort of fit up into the transmission. And so knowing that, and if you look down the fuselage, there was a slight twist in it. It just wasn't quite right. And then in the nose were all the bullet holes that he was talking about. And then later on cruise, the guys were busting some rust, and there's these little square patches all over the aircraft where the bullet holes were, and a lot of them were made out of Budweiser, the old tin can Budweisers that they just cut out and put on.
Wow. That is a fine tradition that apparently continues today. I was from Tennessee originally, and there's a Army Redstone Arsenal to the south, and there was an Army. It was an OH-58 Delta, so it's basically like a Bell 206. There's a big ball up on top, bigger engine, 4 blades, and it came through. Looked beautiful. It looked like a brand new helicopter. Yeah. And I'm a big photographer. I was taking photos, and the data plate was into the chin bubble, and it looked burned and kind of bent. And I asked the pilot, and he says, "Well, funny story. This aircraft crashed in Afghanistan." And they sent the team in. They cut the data plate out. That was the only part of the aircraft. Everything else was parts. Wow. And they built a parts aircraft around that data plate. Yeah. But as far as Congress knows, it's the same aircraft. Right. Which, again, is a bit of a misnomer, I think we might be able to charitably say. Yeah. But not quite as dramatic as that. Wow. Yeah. That was the providence of some of those helicopters.
They were all Vietnam era.
Yeah.
All of them. They were birds from the Marine Corps, because the Marines flew Alphas, then Deltas, and then they went to Echoes.
Okay, so were you flying Deltas or
Echoes?
Deltas. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the major difference, if you remember, just anything between Alphas and Deltas and Echoes?
The Alphas were very underpowered. Very little armor protection on them. The Deltas got a little bit better engine, a little bit better armor protection, and then the Echoes had a whole new electronic suite. They had, towards the end, they had almost a glass cockpit, almost. In the Deltas, the only navigation stuff we had was a TACAN and ADF. It was supposed to be a GPS, but it was this big thing the size of a shoebox that you were supposed to plug in, and every time you plug it into the console, but you couldn't get any reception on it. You had to hold it up next to the window to get any reception, so we never used it.
That's fantastic. Probably the first generation of GPS, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
There was no multifunction display. No, it looked like a World War II cockpit.
Steam gauges.
Yeah, everything's steam.
That's what I'm used to. I love it.
Yeah. And it was the console was designed hodgepodge. So there was the original gauges, and then as they added more things to it, they just stuck them in random places. So your scan is all over the place.
Yeah.
And the scan for left seat and right seat were very different.
Were all the birds at least the same, even if it was at hodgepodge? Okay.
Yeah.
So at least you could get some kind of standardization.
Yeah. And then for flying at night, or if you're flying NVG, actually flying at night, you could switch over to red. So all the eyebrow lights were red. But if you're flying NVGs, there were covers that you would put over them all. And as you're flying, these things bounce everywhere. The covers are falling off. You're like, I can't see. Yeah. Or one time we were doing, me and Sean Valentine were doing night vert rep off the SoCal coast between a supply ship and the Connie Constellation. And it was black as the darkest pits of hell. It was just dark, overcast, no moon. And so we had a load on. I think it was like 3 500-pound bombs or something. And there was a light. I was in the right seat, and so Chunky Sean had the controls in the left seat. And I was about to take the controls, but before one of my eyebrow lights. So we're not NVGs. You don't, at least in those days, we didn't vert rep with NVGs because you don't have peripheral vision and whatnot. So and then they need the deck lit up so the guys in the deck can work it. So it's all without NVGs. So one of the eyebrow lights kept on flicking on and off. So, and I could smell like almost like an oil, but not gas, but just some sort of like kerosene sort of. It was just this weird smell. But anyway, so there I am, and I'm poking the eyebrow light, trying to get it to stay on, and then this arc goes between my finger and the eyebrow light, and there's a little poof, like a little flash, like a little flame, and the whole cockpit goes black. So here we are in this black-ass night. We're at 200 feet, actually less, about 150 feet, with 1,500 pounds of bombs on, with the carrier right beside us. And we put the load down, and we tell the boss, "Hey boss, we've got a bit of emergency in the cockpit. We're just trying to figure out." He says, "Okay, do you guys need to come in and land?" We're like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So we come in, we land, and he's like, "Hey, do you guys need to shut down and spend the night?" And it's stupid things you do. Chunky looks at me, he's like, "Dude, I don't want to stay the night here." And I was like, "Neither do I." So we talked to the crewman in the back, like, hey man, you okay going up here and shining a flashlight on the instrument panel? He says, yeah, man, I don't want to stay the night. So we're like, no, boss, we're good. So with the crewman in the tunnel there shining a flashlight on the instrument panels, we took off and flew the 80 miles back over the water back home. Stupid things you do when you're in your 20s.
What was it like flying with the crewman, though? Was it a pretty good... I mean, it sounds like you guys worked well together as a team. That's what I'm hearing from this story.
You had to. It was very much... not a cowboy atmosphere, but a let's get it done no matter what the cost, which sometimes cost a bit too much.
You have to know where the line is.
It was, and sometimes that line got blurred a little bit, just like in my story right there. It was because we were, you're expeditionary. You don't have a CAG that you're working for. You're out doing stuff away from the Commodore. The ship asks you to do something. You're like, how can you figure out how to do this?
You want to say yes. That's the
you
job.
Want to say yes all the time. But sometimes the lines, especially with young officers, the lines would get blurred with the crewmen. That had very negative consequences. So it was always keeping that in check. And then when you go to a foreign port together, there's only, you'd have, let's say 5, 6 pilots, maybe set with the OIC 7 pilots. So you have the OIC 2 04s and then 4 or 5 JOs. No, I'm sorry. You'd have the OIC who was an 04, 2 or 3 hacks, and then 2 or 3 two-piece. Yeah, that's kind of how it worked. So you'd all go out together. You go to the bars together, and then the crewmen, you might have 7 crewmen, 6, 7 crewmen, and the air crew was stuck together. And so sometimes the boundaries might get blurred a little bit, but it was always, and sometimes if things got a bit out of hand when you're in a port, when that next flight, things might be a little bit tense in the aircraft. So it was something I was always very cognizant of, and as I became a department head and a skipper, it's something that I was unwavering on the relationship between pilots and the crewmen. It was never good when those lines were blurred.
Nope, nothing good ever happens.
Yeah. And then then you'd have, say you have a weak pilot, and you got a crewman that's a little full of himself, a little bit froggy, and then starts making fun of the pilot when they're flying because he makes a bad approach in for a vert rep. That's never good. And then that pilot just goes down in a downward spiral because his confidence is shot to hell.
Yep.
So there was good and bad with it. Yeah. I think the relationships now are much better. They're healthier, let's say. And I think when we started having female air crewmen, it changed that for the better also.
Gotcha.
There wasn't much nonsense going on.
I've always found it kind of humorous, not at all related to this, but I had a, in a board, you do a murder board, I think is the term, or aircraft commander board, 2P board, whatever. I always thought it was really funny when people would always make the worst case scenario, right? Brand new co-pilot, brand new crewman, and then one of the more serious emergencies I had where I lost an engine was with the newest co-pilot in the squadron and the newest crew chief in the squadron. And I'll name drop a little, Matt Bozzi and AWS, I think 2, Lindsay Randler, and they both did awesome. So I always kind of jokingly said, when we always do these boards, no, they did fine. The newest people aren't always the worst, actually. But it's always it's a big learning.
It is, and that relationship is critical between the front and the back of the aircraft. It really is, especially on a bird like the 46, where the crewman, so if something's going on with the engine, they'll go back into the engine bay and they open up the hatches for the engines, and it's right there.
Really?
Yeah, because the engines open up to the inside.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, when we used to get, for our box lunches, we would always get sandwiches that were still frozen. And that's if they didn't give us a plate of spaghetti.
Great to eat on a helicopter in flight, by the way. Yes,
or
I've had that.
A paper plate with stew. Are you kidding me?
Oh,
yeah, all the time. So anyway, they would open up the engine bay and they'd stick the frozen sandwiches up inside the engine, and it was like a microwave. It would warm them up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but they were. You couldn't fly that aircraft successfully without good crewmen. Couldn't do it.
Where did you deploy? You already mentioned a couple different parts of the world, but can you kind of go back through the list for me? And
yeah.
I think you saw a little bit. All I saw was the Middle East 3 times. I went to Bahrain 3 times.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the burden of our careers in the past 20 years. You're Middle East heavy. And when I was deploying before 9/11, we used to lament of the days when you're doing proper med cruises, where you're doing proper Westpacks. But when we lost the Philippines, you couldn't really do proper Westpacks anymore. And then after the tanker wars in the late 80s, it all changed. It was all Middle East centric. This is before Iraq, before 9/11. We've been there for quite some time. And I can go into the politics of why, but it really started in the mid 80s in the tanker wars, when we were guaranteeing the sovereignty of the Kuwaiti ships,
reflagging them and escorting them with U.S. Navy vessels and aircraft.
That's right.
Yeah.
We weren't going to do it. We wanted nothing to do with it. But then the Soviets said that they were going to do it.
I did not know that.
So we decided, well, we are not going to let the Soviets do this. Right, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So we got involved in it, and we hadn't left in 40 years.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So, first deployment, we went to, it was a Westpac. It was on the USS Peleliu. On the Peleliu. We went to the Middle East, dropped the Marines off up in Kuwait. I'm sorry. Was it Kuwait? Yeah, we dropped the Marines off. They went up to Kuwait. We swung in the hook up there for a while. That's at an anchor, which is miserable in the middle of the summer in the Gulf.
Yes, it is.
And then we got called out of the Gulf early. We took the Marines on board and went down to East Timor. East Timor had kicked off. There was a civil war there between the Timorese and the Indonesians. And the Australians were very much in combat down there, trying to protect villages and so forth. So we were the first Americans to get there. Flying was amazing. It was, you're right there. This beautiful Dili was the main city. It was very sad. I went into Dili a few times, and the place was just devastated. And there was the atrocities that were happening there were just horrific.
What kind of, was it bringing in supplies? What kind of, bringing in Marines for security?
The Marines were there for security and for humanitarian.
Okay.
So
and you're supporting them.
Yeah, 53s were bringing tons of rice and foodstuffs to the villages to help them, supporting the international coalition that was there. A lot of perimeter security, that type of stuff. And so since the Marines were doing mostly land-based, when we sat in Dili Harbour for, it was maybe 2 months, we did 130 days constantly at sea. So we got,
it's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long-ass time.
Yeah. 4 months.
And the ship was on the hook there in Dili Harbour, and there were some little islands just around there, and so we used to go, just for flight time, we'd go flying around the islands or up into East Timor itself. It was beautiful, just achingly beautiful. And we'd doing low level and flying along the beach, and then all of a sudden you see all this thrashing in the water, and you go over and it's a big feeding frenzy of sharks. Or, some of the stuff you'd see flying, it was just gorgeous. I remember one day, I was flying with Chunky, with Sean Valentine, and it was miserably hot. So we decided that we were going to go for a swim. So we went and landed on the beach, and we got one of us stayed with the airplane.
Spinning.
And
we can't shut down, obviously.
No, we didn't want to shut down. So the rest of us went and ran in the water, and we had to swim. Took off our flight suits, had to swim, jumped back in the helicopter, and came back. It was a magical time. It was really it was the way flying and military flying is supposed to be. It was cool. So
and that sounds so incredibly foreign to me, because that's not.
It's not. No, it's not. It's not. It's a different. And it's funny when I talk to, guys who were my skippers back then, and they would tell me stories of when they were flying, and I'd be like, oh man, I wish it was still like that. And East Timor kind of gave us a taste, because it was combat conditions, but we weren't in danger, and we were the only people there. There was an airfield, but it was a broken down tower, and the Australians were just treating it like a CTAF kind of thing. Side story. The girl that was on the radios sounded beautiful. I mean, she sounded like just every guy's dream. So anytime we're flying in there, the guys in the back were like, "Sir, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up." I'm like, "Oh man, she sounds so beautiful." So I decided I'm going to go in and find out for myself. So I hitched a ride in one of the helicopters, go traipsing over the airfield, and go up to the tower, just under the guise of doing some training with them.
Yeah, of course. Important stuff, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't the case.
You were let down.
Yes, I didn't tell the guys that, though.
That's funny.
No. I mean, the Kiwis were down there, the New Zealanders. And so our guys are there with, if you have to go on a 1-foot step ladder, you're wearing a cranial and goggles. The Kiwis are up there in a pair of shorts, nothing else on, barefoot, on top of they're flying 60s as well. On top of the 60s, doing everything, because it's hot.
Yeah.
It's hot.
Yeah.
You know, it's in America, the hotter it is, the more crap you got to wear.
Yeah. A little bit different.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, where'd you go after that?
So I was East Timor. So it was that deployment was Middle East, East Timor.
Okay.
Then we pulled into Darwin for a bit. We did Singapore, Phuket, Korea, Pohang, Korea. Don't ever go to Pohang, Korea. Where else did we do that?
You can't just say that. Why not?
It's a center where iron ore gets shipped out.
Okay.
So where we pulled in was in an industrial port, and we're right between two big cargo ships. And so they're loading the iron ore into these ships. And our ship had about 2 inches of iron ore dust over everything.
2 inches?
It was disgusting.
Ugh.
Just it's inside, it's in the intakes, it's in the cockpits, it was everywhere. And the town of Pohang itself, lovely people, but where the bus dropped us off, it dropped us off in front of the cinder block building, which instead of doors, it just had like the plastic strips coming down. And to say it was a house of ill repute is being nice.
Yeah.
It's
very in your face in that part of the world.
Yeah, it was very in your face, and the downtown part, like everybody would come back with the bottom 1 foot of their pants is just black with the slush and the nastiness on the streets and stuff.
Yeah.
But the people were wonderful, and there was great food, and we made the best of it, and we had fun. It's just it was an industrial place.
Sure.
That's really
That makes perfect sense.
I don't want to give. I don't want to have any of the fine residents of Pohang running after me.
I don't think they will.
Yeah. So I was at deployment. I know Hawaii, Westpacks, you're always doing Hawaii. Hawaii on the way there and Hawaii on the way back. Second, then we did a RIMPAC on the USS Boxer, which was lots of fun. That was all around Hawaii. And then did another deployment on the Boxer where it was, this deployment. We go up into the Red Sea and we pull into Aden. And the Marines get off and they bring all their howitzers and their tanks and everything with them. And I was so excited. I had read all of T.E. Lawrence's works, Seven Pillars of Wisdom. I was so excited to go there and go visit Petra and see where Lawrence had attacked Aden from the shore. And it was like, man, this is great. And then the day after the Marines leave, they get recalled because somebody was lobbing mortar shells at us. So we pull out, the Marines left all their consumable equipment behind, everything they jumped on. So they didn't get a chance to do what's called the agricultural washdown. Before the ships come on, the vehicles come back on a ship, you got to wash them down. So they didn't get to do that. Well, it turns out that the person lobbing mortars was this guy named Osama bin Laden. And this was June, I think maybe June of 2001, June or July 2001.
Wow. Yeah.
So the Fifth Fleet didn't know what to do with us because we were supposed to be in Aden for a whole month as the Marines were doing exercises with the Jordanians. So we were floating around in the Red Sea. About 2 weeks of that was a sandstorm, and flying around in the sandstorm. It was just enough so you could go fly, but like you couldn't see a horizon. Our turbine blades were getting chewed up. The rotor blades are getting chewed up. Nobody knows where we're going, how long we're going to be there. So then what did we do? Then we got called to go down to East Timor again. So second deployment went down there again. And I knew all the great places to fly, so we had a rare old time. And then we still couldn't find a place to do agricultural washdown, so we couldn't go to Thailand, we couldn't go to Singapore, we couldn't go to any of those places. And eventually the governor of Guam agreed to allow us to come in, but everything had to be washed down on the pier. So we went to Guam, did that, and then, if I remember right, I think we went to Thailand, then after that, and then back to Hawaii. But before that, in between that, we just left Guam, and I was the duty SAR pilot. I was lying in my rack reading Memoirs of an Infantry Officer by Siegfried Sassoon, and the captain comes over to 1MC and says, yeah, we've just got distress call for a fishing boat that's sinking. It's about 150 miles to the south of us, so actually it was more than that. I think it was like 300 miles. It was a long way away anyway. So the ship had turned and it was doing full speed heading down there. But where the boat was it was in the middle of a typhoon, and it wasn't quite a typhoon, but like two storms had hit together. So it was nasty, nasty weather. So I got on a brief, and actually maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was like 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, because about 10 o'clock at night I think I took off. And when I went up to the flight deck, and we're doing pre-flight and all that, and I'm thinking, it's not going to be too bad because I could see a horizon. But when I took off, I realized that the horizon that I thought I saw was actually the reflection of the ship's lights on the clouds above us. So that the cloud layer was at about 80 feet.
Oh my gosh, that's low. Yeah.
So we went straight up into the clouds. CATC was vectoring us over to where the boat was. It was we had so the ship was running Chinese to try and lessen the winds over the deck. So they're running with the winds, because our limit, I think, was 45 knots to take off. So there was 90-something knots coming over the deck. So he ran with the wind, and the Airbus told me that when we took off, there was 87 knots of wind over the deck when we took off. That our LSE was holding on to the pad eyes.
Oh my gosh, to keep from being blown.
Yeah, to keep
off
from being
the
blown off the ship. So we take off, and the funny thing is when you're in a helicopter and it's tied down and you've got 100-knot winds, the helicopter doesn't know the difference. You know, it's the safest place to be is in the helicopter.
In the helicopter, yeah.
Yeah. So we took off, dark, nasty, lightning, rain. We used to have, there was no air conditioning in the 46. So there were these little scuppers.
Yep.
You know,
I have one in the 53 because we don't have air conditioning either.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was raining so hard that the rain was pouring in through those little air scuppers. So we were flying out there. I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if we're going to come back tonight. And I said to the crewman, Tommy Smith was the crew chief in the back. I brought two swimmers. Usually it's just a crew chief and a swimmer, and I brought two swimmers with me and an extra raft, third class and second class swimmer. And I said to Tommy, hey, Tommy, you doing all right back there? He says, yes, sir. How you doing up there? And I just go, I can't see a freaking thing. And he says, sir, I really wish you didn't tell me that. Because there was no light. The NVGs was like the TV screen, you know, with just the snow on it. And the guy I was flying with, wonderful guy, but he had less than 100 hours of model.
So it's all on your shoulders at this point?
Yeah. So flying out there, it was one of those times where you always wonder how you will react when it hits the fan, right? So it was really, I really felt like my mettle was being tested. So we flew out there, and I see this red sort of glow in the clouds, and it was them shooting off flares. And so it was a fishing boat with 9 Chinese fishermen on it, and the fishing boat was on fire, and it was sinking. There's about 30-foot waves. The boat was just coming all the way out of the water, crashing down into waves coming over it. Winds were probably steady 70 knots, gusting to 80, 90 knots. So like there are times when airspeed is reading 80 knots, but I'm just sitting still.
You're in a hover, yeah.
So we get there, and we'd initially planned on hoisting guys down hoisting one guy down and then bringing the rest back up. But the boat was full of antennas and fishing lines and everything, and big trawler poles. And plus, it was going all over the place. There was no way we could do that. So we're trying to figure out, how do we get these poor souls off the boat? So we had just gotten a new type of raft. And it's the raft that we have now, but back then it was brand new. We didn't have any instructions or nothing. And the old rafts, you used to hook them onto the side of the helicopter and throw it out. And then it would inflate. The little tether would separate, and it would inflate going all the way down, and then it's in the water, inflated. Well, this one was different, and we didn't know that. So we decided we were running low on gas, and because it had taken so long to get out there with the headwinds, we decided they didn't look like they were in extremis right then. The fire looked like it was going out. So we thought we'd throw them a raft, get them to tie the raft off, so in case it was sinking, they could get in there, we'll go get more gas and then come back. So Tommy Smith, he hooks up Tommy Phillips, not Smith, Tommy Phillips, he hooks up the lanyard for the life raft to right where the stairs, so the ladder comes open from the helicopter, throws it out, and I'm there trying to hold a hover, and I hear expletives. What's going on? And I see this half-inflated raft floating up in front of me as I'm trying to hold the hover, and it looks like it's going to go into the rotor arc. And so I'm like, oh my god, and I'm trying to move, like get some forward momentum on the helicopter, but I can't do it too much because the blade, the rotor system, it dips down. So I'm trying to do that, and I'm yelling, cut it off, like we're trying. So it falls back down, it goes down, and then it comes back up again. And as it's coming back up again, he cuts it off, and it falls into the water. So it gets in the water, and a wave comes along and just blows it right away. It's gone. So we know. We realize this is how this thing is supposed to work. So they throw the raft. They throw another one in, and it inflates. How do they do it? I think as they pull the lanyard as they were throwing it out, and it falls in the water, and then it inflates right beside the boat. Perfect. And then we leave. As I'm flying back, I hear this tapping on the overhead of the helicopter, just like almost on the windscreen. So I'll get back to that later. So we land and gas up again, and we go back out. And as we get there, we see all these 9 Chinese guys, and they're wrapping fishing tackle floats around themselves because they don't have life vests. They got no life preservers. And they're going to do that to jump into the water. So we realized then that we got to get these guys. Otherwise, they're dead. They're gone. So I say to the guys in the back, all right, guys, this is the plan. This is what we got to do. We're going to put a raft in the water. I'm going to hoist you down, get the raft over beside the boat, tie the raft off, and then one by one put the survivors in, and then I'll drop the hook one rotor arc away and swim them over to the hook, and we'll bring them up. Sounds like a plan. And then I hear, hey, sir, we're going to go down on ICS here for a minute. Okay. So it was the younger guy didn't want to get in the water. As I was talking to him, and he was like, sir, I can't do this. I can't do it. And then the other guy says, hey, we're going to go down ICS. So I don't know what they said, but about a minute later, he comes back home and he says, yep, we're good. So throw the raft in the water. It inflates upside down, and 2 swimmers go in, and one of them, the younger guy, lost his mask and snorkel, and then the older guy, he goes over to the raft and pulls it and swims it over to the boat. They tie it off. The second class gets into the fishing boat. He goes all around it, makes sure he gets everybody, and then he starts putting them into the raft. Once they're in the raft, remember they have no flotation. So he takes off his horse collar, his flotation device, gives it to one of the survivors. And the younger guy then takes him, and they go to... And he also gives... The second class gives the third class his mask and snorkel. So they get in the water, and they swim over to where we're putting the hook down into the water. They get over there. It looks like they're trying to get hooked up. And remember, these waves are So there were times when the people in the raft, like all I could see is a wall of water in front of me. So there's times when we would go into a trough of a wave, and then the survivors in the raft would be on the crest of a wave, and they were looking down on us in the helicopter. So like they said that they thought that at times the raft was going to fall down on top of the helicopter. So as this is happening, there's tension and slack going on that rescue cable all this time. There's I think it was 175 feet of cable that was wrapped up inside the winch, inside the hoist. So the crew chief is having to stop the swimmer and the survivor from being dragged through the water. He's letting out tension, reeling it back in, letting it out. And then I hear over the ICS a scream, just this loud scream of someone's in pain. And then I hear this almighty loud pop, like a bang. And silly as it sounds, my immediate thought was like a rotor blade just broke, and I thought we were going to go belly up into the water. But we didn't. I'm like, okay, we're okay. We're okay. What is it? What's going on? As soon as the bang happened, then the screaming stopped. Well, something happened where a wave pulled like a rogue wave or something, pulled the survivor and the swimmer, and it stripped out all 175 feet of the cable. And at the end of the cable is a little ball that holds it in, and that ball just popped out, and that's what the bang was. And Tommy Phillips was being slammed up against the bulkhead of the helicopter, and the cable, because he was, I forgot to mention, because of the slack on the cable, it had gotten wrapped around our nose wheel. I forgot to mention that.
Oh my gosh.
So he was hanging out the door trying to lasso
Get it back.
the cable off, and he was wearing the leather glove, but it was wrapped around his hand. So it was cinching down in his hand, and it was pinning him by his back up against the bulkhead. He managed to get his hand out, otherwise he probably would have lost it. So now I've got a damaged helicopter. I'm not sure what's wrong with the nose gear. And I've got a swimmer and a survivor with 175 foot of cable attached to them and an injured crewman in the back. And then I see a blue strobe light, which is swimmer in distress. So now I'm thinking that there's something catastrophic wrong with the swimmer down below. I'm trying to get hold of the other swimmer on the radio, and either swimmer on the radio. Can't get hold of him. We're looking for them. Like, we see them, we're staying close to them. We talk, there's another winch, there's a cargo winch that you can rig it, and it goes down through the center of the helicopter, through the hellhole. We talked about, we're trying to do that, to rig that, to get them on there. But then we started running out of gas again. So we were in a position where we did get hold of the guy who was in the raft and told him what the situation was. And we communicated, but I didn't know if he heard what I was saying, and it was just a lot of stuff going on. So the boxer had gotten pretty close by this stage. So we went back to get gas and then go back out again. When we were, and then I hear on the radio, I've got him. So it's the other swimmer telling me he's got him. So I'm like, thank God. So that's when we went back to get gas, and then we come back out. And when we come back out, we realize he said, I got him. He had the other swimmer. He didn't have the survivor. So now the survivor's still out there with 175 foot of cable attached to him. So we're circling around trying to find him, and then nobody else would launch from the boat because our other helicopter had no RADALT. And then the Marines didn't have any winches, and it's against their SOP to do nighttime SAR, so they couldn't come in and help us. We're out there on our own. Eventually we find the guy, and he's just sitting there. I thought he was dead. I thought he was gone. But we find him just bobbing there, and then the other helicopters, they were at daybreak then. So we'd been flying, essentially for 8 hours. This thing has been going on for 8 hours. So this is about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Daybreak comes. And it's amazing. When the sun rises, everything calmed. Everything just, it was amazing. It was still a bit choppy, but the other helo launched, and they picked up the survivor. And then the Boxer launched a small boat, and they went over and did a small boat transfer and brought all the others back on board. But the guy that went and rescued the other swimmer, so remember, he's got no mask and snorkel, he's got no flotation. He jumps in with 20 to 30 foot seas, just judging by the strobe light, gets him, brings him back, and the younger kid was completely incapacitated. He was on his all fours, puking his guts up. He would have drowned if that swimmer hadn't gone in to save him. We would have lost him. So that guy's name was Walter Shiver, and he just retired from the Escambia County Sheriff's Office as a deputy.
Wow,
pretty amazing.
Yeah, very amazing.
Pretty amazing.
What a small world.
Yeah. And then when we landed, I learned a lot on that mission, but I was doing a lot of soul searching afterwards about what we could have done different. Everyone got home alive. The limitations of the aircraft became evident. Maybe some of the decision making we thought we were doing the best we could at the time. Whether we were too eager to get the rescue rather than just waiting and seeing what happened. So there was a lot of. It all worked out well in the end. And we all felt like we did our best. Greatest compliment I ever got afterwards when I asked Tommy if he was scared, and he said, "Why would I? You were flying," which was pretty cool.
Absolutely. That's a huge compliment.
The first thing the maintainers did when they got these fishermen on board was they sat them down, gave them some hot chocolate, and they put The Perfect Storm on TV. Yeah, typical sailor.
Yes, no mercy.
But I slept for, about 18 hours afterwards. My body was aching. You don't realize it was just so tense in there. It was the guy that, and the guy I was flying with, he's a wonderful guy, wonderful. But I was a fairly new aircraft commander, and I just wanted to do it all, I said, you handle the radios and I'll do this, I'll do the flying. I maybe could have managed the cockpit a little bit better. At the beginning, I allowed the ship to get in my cockpit, and then when I realized it was too much, I said in nice terms to be quiet, leave me alone. But it was it all worked out well in the end. But it was a big learning experience for me.
I can imagine. That's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, the tapping on the side of the aircraft.
What that was?
That was the lanyard from the raft that had gotten wrapped up in the rotor head. So when we landed and we shut down, there was like 12 foot of rope wrapped around the rotor head, and the nose gear was it all had to be replaced because it was all bent up and.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's a lot more fragile than it looks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a hell of a night.
Yes, I'm sure it was. And this was second cruise.
That was my second cruise.
And you mentioned you were an aircraft commander at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
When did you make aircraft commander? End of the first cruise or in between the first and second?
It was right. So I went on deployment as soon as I got to the squadron.
Okay.
And I made aircraft commander as soon as I got back, like within a month or two after getting back.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Pretty quick. And in the 46 too, you have to remember that we didn't have all the mission sets that modern helicopters do. Can you fly it without killing yourself?
Yeah. You mentioned an important date and time. When did you come back from the second deployment?
That's another good one. So we did the rescue on the 26th of August, 2001.
Okay.
Then we went to Hawaii, and we took on Tigers. And it was a big reception for us. All the press were there because the rescue was big news. Chinese consulate was there to pick up their dudes. And we had a great time in Hawaii, drank a lot of beer because I think we were all still shaking from the rescue.
I think you earned it.
Yeah. Best pancakes in the world is then the Waimea Coffee House right across from Halikoa. And then we leave there. We leave Hawaii to go back to San Diego with all the Tigers. That's for family members, for our listeners.
Tiger Cruise. Do they still do Tiger Cruises? I've wondered. With COVID,
yeah.
I'm sure it's probably a
I
tougher
think
thing,
COVID
but-
killed it, but
Yeah.
I think they want to.
Yeah. Such a cool program. I've only heard about it. I've never obviously
It
been
is.
on one.
And the West Coast, it's so good because you fly to Hawaii, you meet your family out there, you get to have fun with your family.
You come back to America.
Yeah, you come back to America. It's
Yeah.
great. So on the way back, we had a terrible tragedy. A ordnanceman, very young kid, stuck his head into a elevator, and the elevator came up, and it unfortunately killed him. So that happened. That shook everybody up. And then I was in the, like towards the end of the cruise, you can't sleep. You're waking up early. Your sleep rhythm's all messed up. I would rarely make breakfast, but I was down in the in an empty wardroom eating breakfast, and the captain comes over to 1MC and says that an aircraft had just flown into the World Trade Center. And I remember thinking, why do I care? Like, that was a Cessna, probably in a foggy day, that, that's tragic, but it's not something to tell the whole ship about. And then very quickly, we started realizing what had happened and what was going on. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she was working in the Watergate building, and she could see the Pentagon there, so she saw it and all the smoke, and we were emailing back and forth right afterwards, and saying we don't know if we're going to turn back, and she was telling me what was going on in D.C., and then all communications were shut down. So we knew that both buildings were hit. We knew the Pentagon had been hit, and I can't remember if we knew about the other one.
United Flight 93.
Yeah, Flight 93. I can't remember if we knew about it at the time. But then all communications were shut down, and we came back to San Diego because we had all the family members on board, so we kind of had to. So when we came back, so we just remember what was going through our minds. Just on the rescue, we just lost one of our shipmates. Yep. 9/11 happened, and
way to end a cruise,
right?
Yeah.
So I had to bring the remains of our shipmate back to Balboa, and his family was in town waiting for him to come back from cruise. So it took off with his remains to bring it into Balboa, and I'll never forget it. There was nothing on the radios. So this was the day after 9/11. Nothing on the radios. I was always got the SoCal approach, and they said, you are the only aircraft in the Western United States flying right now, so you can go where you like. Checked in with Tower and asked to do our normal course rules, and she says, you can come straight over, just go direct, right over the airfield. It was just so eerie. And they were like, welcome home, sorry you're coming home, some circumstances, the traffic controllers. So brought him in and dropped off our shipmate, and then back to the Boxer, and then the next morning we flew off, pulled in.
Air Wing came back.
Yep.
All the aircraft flew
Yeah,
out.
all the Marine aircraft, they all flew back to Miramar and Pendleton.
Okay.
But that was everybody was going through such a traumatic time and trying to wrap their head around what had just happened.
I tell folks that when you come back from a deployment, I've only done 3, and they're 3 6-monthers, which is truly nothing in the big scope of things. But when you come back, the world kept going without you.
Yeah, very much so. You're absolutely right.
And in this case, you came back and the world changed without you in a big, big way.
Yeah.
And so now, I guess I think I was 4th, 5th grade. I was pretty young on 9/11. But COVID is probably not nearly as dramatic, of course, but the big thing in my life. And I remember going on debt and seeing the way things were before and the way things had changed.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know how to describe it other than when you live it, it's something you'll never forget.
Yeah.
But it's so humbling to hear these stories and realize, where I have a friend who's a state police pilot in Tennessee, and same thing. They had some sort of mission the day after, and they'd be the only aircraft airborne in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Very, very strange feeling, I'm guessing. So.
It is, and when you're going through crises like that, you deal with it in real time, right? And you don't...
you don't think about the bigger context.
No, you don't at all. And naval aviators are very good at compartmentalizing. Sorry, listeners, for my stumbling over the words. We're very good at compartmentalizing because you have to. You've got to put all the extraneous nonsense aside and focus on the mission at hand. And so we're quite good in crisis moments like that of focusing on the things at hand. And it's not until the days, weeks, sometimes even months afterwards that you reflect on whatever it is that happened, and you're like, oh, wow. My wife is very good at articulating issues that I am a week or a month behind her on.
But you're right. It's easy to put things in a box. You have to remember to take them out of that box.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
It's as silly as that sounds. I'm terrible at that. Maybe it's just naval aviators. We have that common trait. We're really good at putting things in the corner.
And that's something, you know, if we talk about my 3 years as CEO of the base, something I learned the hard way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you go? So that's second cruise. The world changed in a big way, but you're fully qualified. You're going back out, I'm guessing, one more time before you left the squadron, that first fleet tour?
No, actually, that was my last.
Okay.
So I had a year at home. I was the QAO in the squadron.
Senior man, yeah.
Did that for a year. So I flew my backside off, flying down to Imperial Beach, I was FCFing all the time.
I was going to ask. I loved FCF. I mean, again, broken old helicopter in my case. I loved FCFing.
So I loved doing FCFs in the 46 because I knew it, and I knew that helicopter. And when, like, the track and balance was so archaic. They used to, like, just before I showed up to the squadron, they used to put chalk dust on
I've heard of
brush,
this. Yes,
right.
Yes.
And now we had.
You had the gun, right?
Yeah, we had the gun. It was so archaic. But I knew just how much collective to pull, where to put the cyclic, how much left or right pedal to put in just to bring it in, just to get it there so we can get the aircraft up and flying. So I did. I enjoyed FCF because I thought I was pretty good at it.
It's a point of pride. You talked about, like, doing the thing. You got the aircraft back on the flight schedule. You did the thing.
Yeah. And I liked flying with the new guys because I found I liked teaching, you know, and I liked there's lots of stuff I learned, and I liked imparting that on them. Sometimes I may not have done it in the nicest of ways, just being a cocky young lieutenant who thinks that he's the cock of the walk, as we are all apt to do.
But you talked about learning. You're still learning. You're learning even as that
very
senior
much
guy.
So.
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah,
because I learned sometimes how ineffective being an asshole is.
It's not for everyone.
And maybe I'm being a bit harsh on myself. I pretty easygoing, nice guy, at least so my kids tell me.
I'll say this, though. I look back at some of the folks that I flew with that kind of had that streak in them, and I'm not going to say forgive them. I give them grace because I realize they were learning too. Yeah. It was a new thing for them. Yeah. I've soloed a glider at 14. I've been in aviation for a very, very long time. Yeah. For them, they'd been doing it 3 years. Yeah. And so they had a lot of responsibility, a lot of trust, and everyone's learning. So
what I learned most of all, and it carried through all the way to my skipper tour, was trust. I was given so much trust with that aircraft, with the 46, in those early days. And when I transitioned to the HS community, I found that there wasn't as much trust there. And it's not because of the people, it's just because the mission sets the way they were. And you're tethered to the carrier, and you're there as the whole squadron, and there's a hierarchy of the qualifications you have, and the most qualified pilots are always the ones that are getting the Gucci missions. But when you're in a debt mentality, you got a guy who just made hack, and you got to send him over the horizon. You got to send him to do whatever it is So I made a very conscious effort when I was a department head and when I was a skipper to give as much responsibility as early as I could, because they're not going to get them. They're so scared of doing something wrong that they're not going to get themselves in trouble. And if they do, they know to call mom or dad.
Yeah.
You know, and the things you learn when you send a young kid over the horizon with a helicopter and a crew, the things you learn there, both in life and in your profession, are profound.
Yeah. It's
so important.
Lucky is your call sign, obviously. Was that first fleet tour? Was it flight school?
Okay. That was first fleet tour.
What's the story there?
So in the helicopter community, especially in the 46s, they didn't call them call signs; they call them mess names because they disdained the TAC Air community. Right? So they're like, we're not fighter pilots; we're helicopter pilots. We're not calling calls. So they were call signs.
Sure.
So I was expecting Mick or Spud or something like that. So they called me after a leprechaun in the front of a box of cereal.
Terrible.
Yes,
terrible.
And luckily the charms dropped off. So at first it was Lucky Charms, and then when I became a department head, and when I went and introduced myself, it was just Lucky.
Lucky, yeah. It sounds better.
And it stuck.
It's got a good ring to it.
Yeah.
Unless there's anything else you can think of from that first fleet tour, I feel like there's got to be way more stories, but I don't want to shortchange the rest of where your career went.
Yeah, sure. No, that was an amazing tour.
Where'd you go after that?
So I was kind of burnt out in flying, and I wanted to see how big Navy worked. So I applied and got posted to be the White House liaison for Secretary of the Navy, which was really cool. Sounded really cool. Sounded cooler than it was. Because as a lieutenant in the Pentagon, you're not going to get any responsibility. By the way, the two ranks to be in the Pentagon is a 4-star or a lieutenant. Everything in between sucks.
Okay. That's good. So get there as an 03 or get there as an a lot more than 3. Yeah.
So I've been there as an 03, but I haven't been there as a 4-star.
There's still time.
But I've worked with plenty of 4-stars.
Yeah. Why is an 03 though? Just because there is that, your no responsibility, you can learn the place?
An 03 in the Pentagon is like a midshipman.
Okay.
Right. So the real worker bees there, the lieutenants are the 05s. They're the worker bees, senior 05s. And then the 06s are like department heads. And then your skippers are your 1 and 2 stars. It's everything is, and that's really you're doing important stuff. Anybody who tells you that you go as an 05 to the Pentagon and you make coffee, I would love to see what Pentagon they went to, because the Pentagon I went to wasn't like that at all. You were doing profoundly important things. Like some of the things that when I was a 04, 05 working in the Joint Staff, some of the things that I got to be a part of, it was national policy types of like making an immediate impact with the COCOMs and the direction that a operation might take. It was pretty profound stuff.
What do you think would surprise someone like me who knows nothing about the Pentagon and the way that works? What's something that, to a layperson, you would think would be the most interesting point?
That there's a lot of very talented, very good people in the Pentagon trying to do impossible things. We give the Pentagon, and really U.S. government, we really give them the short end of the stick and say that they're just bureaucrats. They're people who are just in it for their own self-service, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The issues that they're dealing with are so complex. I always used to say that I worked in the J33, which was the Operations Directorate for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Milley was my boss.
The General Milley?
The General Milley.
Wow.
We became... I don't want to say quite close, because I don't know anybody gets close to General Milley except for his family.
Okay.
But I learned a lot working for him too. But I used to say that the Joint Staff was impossible tasks with impossible timelines. It's everything is because there's so much going on. There's so many things. There's so many alligators close to the canoe that you can only take care of the alligators close to the canoe, and you don't have time for strategic thought and strategic vision, especially at the worker bee level.
Is there a way to fix that? Is there a way to change that, just broadly speaking? Someone who actually worked there?
It would, not within the Pentagon, no. It would take a will by Congress to do it.
Okay.
Because it is very much with how much is laid on the Pentagon's doorstep to do.
The way it's been explained to me is the budget cycle drives everything.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
And if you could fix that, that might help.
Yeah.
But it's so, like you said, you're just fixing today's problem. You can't think.
You can. And the Pentagon, like, for example, there are a COCOM, combatant commander, I'm getting off topic here now, but
no.
Combatant commanders, they're the guys, the barons around the world that run all their wars, that do everything. When they ask for something, they get allocated their forces, and if they need something, a infantry battalion, an aircraft carrier, a destroyer, even a dog team, if they need a dog team that wasn't originally allocated to them in the global force management process, they have to get the Secretary of Defense's explicit permission to be able to use it. So, say a combatant commander, say in the Middle East, he wants a aircraft carrier to be extended in the Middle East. And the Navy says, no, we can't. We've got maintenance schedules, we've got this, that, and the other, and then the other carrier's still due to deploy, and now you're going to have 2 carriers over there, and that's killing us. So then it's up to the Secretary of Defense to arbitrate that. And the services will get together, they'll fight it out, and then the Joint Staff, we would facilitate that, and then it would have to go to SecDef. No Secretary of Defense ever denies a combatant commander. Doesn't happen. When Donald Rumsfeld left, Obama administration comes in, there was some, I can't remember exactly, if I thought long enough about it, I remember, but there was a political storm in a teacup that was going on that was all about allocating stuff to the troops. I think it was as we were looking at pulling out of Afghanistan. So we had to go through every single, it's called a Secretary of Defense Orders Book, when, and that's where he signs off on it. We had to go through every single one for the entire time that Secretary Rumsfeld was there to see if he had ever denied a COCOM.
And he never had.
Because the other party was claiming that Secretary Rumsfeld didn't give the COCOMs what they needed. Of course, it's just political football.
Yeah.
Right? Because no Secretary of Defense wants to be the guy that didn't give General so-and-so the stuff he needed to do the war, because guess who gets blamed?
They do.
Secretary of Defense.
Yep.
So if you think about it in those terms, then the services can never catch a break. They can never catch a breath, which is why we have a Navy that is severely in trouble because of its maintenance backlog, and why we have bases that are funded at 47%.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
How many years was that job? I'm assuming it cannot have been that long.
In the Pentagon?
Yeah.
So I was working on the Joint Staff. I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
But before that, that was after my department head tour.
Okay.
So the first time I went there, I worked a year for Secretary of the Navy.
Okay.
And then it was like being a wedding planner. It was fun, but I was miserable.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity arose to be the flag aide for the Director of Air Warfare. And he's the guy that runs all the budgets for naval aviation.
Okay.
And I thought I was going to get out of the Navy. I actually had a pretty good job lined up. I went to work for, his name was Admiral Mark Fitzgerald, Lobster Fitzgerald. And as I was working for him, all the guys that worked for him, it's in this place called the Ranch in the Pentagon, and it's where it's the naval aviation money guys. And every community sends their best there because it's the money, right? And money controls everything. And that's what people don't realize, how authority equals authority over money.
Yep.
It was the same when I was a base CO, when I was a squadron CO.
Yep.
When you don't have authority over your money, you don't really have real authority.
Yeah.
So I realized there that all these guys, all these top-notch aviators, I was like, these are the guys I want to be around. These are the guys I want to be. And when I started thinking about getting out, I was like, no, this is where I belong. This is what I want to do. So I made a very conscious choice. Then I said, okay, I'm going to stay in, and I'm going to give this my best shot, and I'm going to do my best to try and become a skipper. If I don't make it, okay, but I can at least say that I had a worthwhile and fulfilling career on the way to getting there.
Of course.
So from there, I went to be assistant navigator on the Truman, which was amazing, very hard work. But there we went to through the Mediterranean, through the Suez, up into the Gulf, and that was for the first Iraqi election, where everyone's
busy
dipping
times.
Yeah,
dipping the thumbs in the purple ink. Yeah.
Then we came back through the Med, up into Portsmouth, England. We did JTF exercises on the way over up in the North Sea, which was kind of cool. And then back home, and then we did, as soon as we got home, Hurricane Katrina happened.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Katrina happened, and then the navigator who I worked for was on leave. So the captain says, "Lucky man, I need you to do the charge force and get us down to, from Norfolk, get us down to New Orleans." So I was like, okay, geez. Sorry, I was dumb lieutenant. So figured it out to go down there through the Straits of Florida. And then as we were coming up into the Gulf of Mexico, up into New Orleans, you could see on the horizon just stuff, like waves of stuff in front of us. And as we got closer, we realized it was waves of debris where the tide had gone in and pulled it out. And it was stuff like roofs of houses, animals, cows, alligators, horses, entire trees, just waves of it. And we really slowly sort of bust our way through it until we got to a point where, because it gets really shallow up there, so we anchored at about 80 foot of water, and we had to re-anchor about 5 or 6 times because there's so much debris in the condensers for the reactor. That salt water we bring in, they would suck up all the nastiness. So we had to go into deeper water. But we became like a helicopter platform for for the all the helos that came down there.
Yeah, that had to have been a lot. How long were y'all there in total?
3 weeks, a month.
Wow.
I think.
And just is it all Navy, Marine Corps? What kind of aircraft did you all see?
It was Navy, Marine Corps.
Okay.
And the odd time we got a Coast Guard was most Navy, and maybe we had a couple of Army.
Okay.
But mostly Navy.
What was it like being there but not there? I mean, you were there. You were offshore though. You weren't physically in the.
As a helicopter pilot, it was frustrating.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I really wanted to be out there.
Something you could at least kind of hear what was going on from the folks that got to go to the beach. And,
Yeah, it was. And we were also at like a hotel for the press and all that.
Ah, okay. So you had a lot of VVIPs, as they say,
all
on the
those
boat.
folks.
Yeah. Where'd you go after that?
After that, then, so I was in Norfolk, and I thought that I was going to go to an HC squadron there in Norfolk. That's what the detailer told me. So I did a sort of deal with them to leave me there and send me to the FRS HC2 as a baby department head there. And I show up, and the skipper there is like, I don't know why you're here. And what the hell what am I going to do with you? He was an asshole.
Welcome aboard.
And so I start going through the simulators and all the rest of it, and then the department head board hadn't happened. So we're waiting for the slate to come out. And the detailer, who was an old HC guy, Eric Pfister, there was a delay in the slate for one reason or another. And he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, lucky man, congratulations. You're going to be a Dragon Slayer." A what? Dragon Slayer, man. What's that? He says, "You're going to fly 60s down in Jacksonville." Jackson where? I thought I was saying Norfolk. No, man, it's great. This is going to be great for you. Oh, this was at the beginning of October. And he says, oh, by the way, they need you in San Diego in 10 days. Because the squadron was going to deploy and they wanted to get me out there ASAP. And oh, by the way, my now wife had just moved down from quit her very good job. She was a political appointee for the Bush administration. Quit that job to come down and live with me because we were going to stay down there, and she was looking for a job.
Yeah.
So I come home and I'm like, "Hey, babe," and I hadn't asked her to marry me yet. She was just down there on faith. So I said, "Hey, babe, the slate came out." She says, "Oh, great. Okay, we're staying here." "No, we're going to Jacksonville." "What? Jackson where?" So I went out to San Diego to go through the FRS. She moved us down. I flew back from the FRS to get married. And then as soon as I got back from the FRS, then I went in deployment on the Enterprise, Big E.
Yeah.
Went through the Med. Then the Gulf, we did... we spent a lot of time doing Overwatch for the ABOT and KBOT, the
all platforms.
Oil platforms up there.
Yep.
And this was right after the Royal Marines had been kidnapped by the Iranians. So the Royal Navy didn't have the capability or the ROE to fly with heavy weapons on board the helos. So we would fly up there with Hellfires and 50 cals and do Overwatch for them and go into Basra every now and again doing stuff. And we'd operate off of a old Falklands War era supply ship, which served beer, which was awesome.
As they do, yes.
They do, yeah.
They still do, by the way.
Yes. I found a way to sneak in there at nighttime, and like the refrigeration unit was right beside the fridge, and I could take the front off the refrigeration unit, and then I could reach in behind the glass door and get the cans of beer. No, I did not do that.
Technique only.
Yeah. Technique only.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, so that was fun.
Good folks to work with?
Oh, they're great. They're awesome. They were like just can do, because they're merchant mariners are like ours.
Yes.
You know, they're just regular dudes earning a paycheck. A lot of them ex-Navy.
Yep. We had RFA Cardigan Bay. We called her Cardi B.
Yeah.
Out in Bahrain when I was out there, and those guys were great. Actually, they're box nasties. The box meals on Cardigan Bay way better than anything I had from a Navy ship.
Ours. Yeah, they were.
No offense to the USNS.
Ours was
fleet.
the Sir Bedivere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was actually in the Falklands.
Wow, it was a veteran of that conflict.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's probably not anymore. Probably scrapped
she's gone
somewhere.
now. Yeah. So that was a department head tour.
Okay.
Trying to think of anything exciting then. I mean, there were some tragedies then, like our sister squadron. They lost their CO in a accident out in Fallon.
Good Lord.
Yeah, hit a wire and pancaked it into the deck. That was very, very sad. And that was we had just gotten married, and it was my wife's introduction to naval aviation. So that was it was kind of a welcome to the Navy.
Yeah,
for her.
That's tough.
But that was I loved my department head tour. I loved being the maintenance officer. I was fortunate enough to have all 4 jobs.
Not just the big 2, not just ops and maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I didn't go to safety school, but I got to do safety in my last couple of months there just because I had nothing else to do. And I just wanted to go to the War College and take a year off because I'd been through some pretty high stress jobs, from the Pentagon to ANAV and then department head. And the skipper then one day says, "Hey, what do you think about being a detailer?" And you don't say no to being the detailer. So I wasn't thrilled about it, but I liked the idea of helping, our fellow shipmates and trying to help people to shape their career. So I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah, you don't turn it down." And then, about a week later, a detailer calls me up and says, "Hey, Lucky, we've been looking at your record, and we think you might be a good candidate for whether it's nuke power or major command or whatever it is eventually. So we want you to go joint now to get your joint over with."
Get the joint credit. Okay.
And I always believed in wherever I was going, I always wanted to do something that was interesting to me. And it's fortunate that those things that were interesting to me happened to be good for my career. So I said, and he was like, "Listen, man, go wherever you want. We're pulling you around here." This was in the days when you could actually work with the detailers. I said, "We're pulling you around here, so what do you want to do?" And he said, "Well, I want to do something that's useful, and I want to do something that means something, so what about the joint staff?" So got a job in the Joint Operations Directorate, and boy, was it, that was, how can I put it, some of the most miserable and some of the most exhilarating days in uniform.
Can you give me an example of the miserable and an example of the exhilarating?
Yeah.
To kind of get those broad corners.
So what I didn't like was you were essentially the operations officer for the world. Anything happened in the world, you were the first ones that had to write get the executive orders written that the Secretary of Defense had to sign, brief the SecDef. It was down in the National Military Command Center, down in the basement of the Pentagon.
Who is SecDef at this time?
Gates.
Okay.
Right. It was Rumsfeld and Gates.
Okay.
And Gates was very good. The Pentagon was a good place to be when he was there. Very even keeled. He was good.
So that place reflects the personality of the person running it. Would you say?
To a certain extent.
Okay.
To a certain extent, yeah. On the joint staff, I'll say it will anyway. So when Haiti happened, I was the acting div chief for Southern Command. So I owned everything in the Caribbean and South and Central America. I was out having a dinner at Landini's in Old Town with Admiral Fitzgerald. I was on my 3rd glass of wine, and we see on the news that an earthquake happened in Haiti. Actually, just as we were going out, we see an earthquake happen in Haiti, and Jen goes, "Oh, man, there goes the weekend." And go out on my 3rd glass of wine, and I'm just praying, like, they're not going to call. And I got a call, and I was like, "Hey, Lucky man, I need to get in here right now." And I was like, "I'm on my 3rd glass of wine." This was at 10 o'clock. And he said, "Okay, go home, sleep for an hour, and then get in." So at 1:30 in the morning, I go in. So it was 1:30 in the morning. I went home at, I think it was about 10 o'clock then that night. I remember Mike Mullen, who was the chairman at the time, came down. I was working in the little bubble at NMCC, just doing stuff, and he ripped us a new a-hole because there's a 1-star down there that runs that sort of platform. It's like, "You people are not moving at the speed my job requires," and so forth and so on. I'm not sure it did any good, but it was fun to watch.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're probably a fly on the wall at that point.
So, and then it was working in that sort of high pressure, 12 on, 12 off. It was really more like 14 or 15 on, and then a few hours off. We were very high pressure. We were preparing briefs for the president. Everybody who was anybody in government, we were preparing all the information. We're the conduit for everything, for all the decision makers. So it's very, very high pressure there, and it was every single day for 6 weeks. And the thing when you're working somewhere like that, it's funny, when you're working in a squadron or on a ship, you're always looking at your enlisted sailors and how are they doing? Are they getting time off? Are they getting some downtime? And you're concerned about them. Not so in the Pentagon. When a crisis is happening, it's every man for himself. And the general is so knee-deep in the 3 stars and the 4 stars that he doesn't have time to think. And you're so short-staffed that you can't leave. Everybody's filling a critical role. So just that feeling that you're just trying to do the best you can without any real training, without any, doing what you can. But at the same time, and that was it was really frustrating as a young officer.
Do you miss it at all?
The Pentagon?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, no.
It's a good thing to be there for that tour, but glad to be.
I learned so much.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned so much. General Milley, working with him, I learned a lot of things from him that translated directly into command. Just his ability to distill the most complex problems into into a very simple, not a solution, but just a very simple way of looking at it, getting down to the very basis of what the issue is. And that's a skill. That's a learned skill. And that was very, very useful to me, both in this last command and as a squadron officer. Just getting rid of all the nonsense, all the noise. What is the issue? What are we really working on here? And it makes it. The good commanders do that, right? They know what's important and they focus on that and they get it done and then they move on. But conversely, like something that was amazing is sitting down there, and this is during Haiti, and I'm working on a computer doing something. It's amazing the things you can get done with Google and a telephone. So one day, the chairman's secretary calls me up and she says, "Is this Lucky?" I says, "Yes, ma'am. Kinsella, is that your name?" "Yes, ma'am. What can I do for you?" "Okay, the chairman wants you." So it's me. Somehow he got my name. She says, the chairman's getting a lot of flack from the press about Doctors Without Borders not being able to get into Haiti. The chairman wants you to figure out how to get Doctors Without Borders into Haiti. Yes, ma'am. Can you do that? I'll give it my best shot. So, and it was in all the press that we had created a air bridge to bring supplies and troops and everything into Haiti. So the airfield before the hurricane, it was only taking about 7 flights a day. That's the capacity of the airfield. The Air Force STS, their Special
Tactics Squadron.
Special Tactics Squadron.
Yep.
Air Force STS went down there and using a wooden table and their handheld radios, they were getting, I think, it was like 104 aircraft a day in there. Amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And every aircraft had a set time that they had to meet gates at to be there. Well, Doctors Without Borders, and it was all no-timed, right? How you get in, how you get scheduled. But whoever Doctors Without Borders was working with refused to go through the process. So every time they would fly in, they would get turned away because if they come in, that means a C-130 full of supplies has to get kicked out. But that's not the story that was being told to the press. So it meant that the Obama administration had a beef with Médecins Sans Frontières, and they weren't letting them in for whatever reason. And then Hugo Chavez got on a plane with Doctors Without Borders just so as he could then, knowing it was going to get turned around, just so as he could say that he was being kicked out of Haiti even though the Venezuelan government was giving all this stuff. So he was just like, make it go away. What the hell am I going to do? So I was like, geez, what am I going to do? So it's amazing what you can get done with Google and telephone. I Googled Doctors Without Borders, their website, called up lots of people. It's great when you say, I'm calling from the Pentagon, because it was great when I was working for Secretary of the Navy. I'm calling from the White House liaison, Secretary of the Navy.
Because people are told, don't say no to that person.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I got hold of, I can't remember who it was, somebody at Doctors Without Borders, and I told them what I'm trying to do. And she goes, you can do that? And he said, yes, ma'am. Just, can you give me the tail number of the plane that's going to go? Okay. So she calls her back up. She gets it. I call up the guys on the ground, the STS guys on the ground, give them the tail number, and I'm like, guys, they need to get in. All right? I don't care who it is. They need to get in. And I developed a relationship with them over a while. So we did. I got in. A couple of days later, I get a phone call from the White House. He says, "Is this Lucky?" So apparently my name was getting around. He says, "Is this Lucky?" He says, "Yes. Sir, I've got some rescue workers. They are on a mountainside in Haiti, and they need to talk to somebody at the Pentagon." Okay, I'm going to patch them through right now. So they're talking on sat phones. They call the White House hotline. The White House calls me. They get us together, and they were operating on some people who had been crushed, and they were amputating limbs in this derelict building on the side of a mountain in Haiti. And he said, "We're not asking to be rescued. All we need is water and some basic medical supplies." So my squadron was on the, what carrier was it? Roosevelt. So my old squadron was on the Roosevelt, and I knew some of the guys that worked on the strike group staff. So I call up the strike group chief of staff, and I say, "Hey, can you do this? Can you get them?" "Yep, Roger, got it." So they loaded up some of the Dragon Slayer helicopters with water and everything. They brought them there, and a week later, my wife got People magazine, and there was a picture of those guys and the person whose life they had saved. And the caption was, "Navy helicopters bringing supplies just in time to save this person's life."
Wow.
So when you see things like that, it's like, it doesn't matter how miserable it is.
That's probably what you would miss.
Yeah,
that type
that's
of thing.
what you got
yeah,
to.
Yeah.
So that was...
That's incredible, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know what to say other than that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Where'd you go next?
So next, so the department head tour, then a joint staff working with General Milley, and then I got selected for command. And my old skipper was the 05 detailer, and he said, "Hey, Lucky, where do you want to go? Do you want to go back to expeditionary, or do you want to go back to the carrier?" And I immediately said carrier. No ifs, ands, or buts. I loved going to sea as a squadron. I loved leadership opportunities and challenges it brought, and carriers are the heart of naval aviation. Whether you're in a helicopter, whether you're working on the flight deck, whether you're an ordnanceman, whether you're flying F-18s, it is the heart of naval aviation. And I love that. So I said, absolutely. And he says, "Well, I think your time, and how do you feel about going back to the Dragon Slayers?" I said, that would be amazing. So I went back there as skipper, and it was amazing. It was everything I thought it would be, except more.
What did you think it would be? What was your impression going into that job?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
It seems like a lot of responsibility. You're the boss. You are the guy assigned the flight schedule. You were in charge of the whole squadron.
Yeah, except, so I think going into it, I just wanted to be a good leader. I was very, very conscious of the fact that my whole job there, my role, was to ensure that squadron was combat ready. And it was my responsibility to get everybody home safe. And if we were to go into combat, that I gave everybody the greatest opportunity to come home alive. And that was my overarching intent going in everything. As an XO, as a skipper, it was all about, when we go in deployment, that we are ready. And when the call comes, we're ready to do it. And the only way to get everybody back with their fingers and toes is that they're the best at doing their job that is possible. So that may be my overarching philosophy going in, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, right? In order to be there, you've got to have a squadron that loves being in that squadron. You've got to have people that love being there. You've got to have people that believe in what they're doing, that in order for us to maintain that level of combat readiness, I'm going to work their ass off, but they got to love doing it. So how do you create that environment? So to me, leadership is about creating an environment that allows your people to reach their fullest potential. And all the stuff that goes into that, all the stuff that we talk about trust and about giving your people the opportunity to succeed, and all this leadership stuff. That's really it. We're creating that environment so all those people can be the best that they can be, and they're not going to do that if they're miserable. So there's a balance in there about pushing them, but yet still having an environment where they love it. And there are certain things you can do there. There are things that will destroy a unit that has strong bonds so quickly. One is if you don't maintain standards, that you have a hack butt.
I've heard that term. Yep.
So a hack butt, for all you listeners out there, a hack is a helicopter aircraft commander, and a hack butt is somebody that is a helicopter aircraft commander, except they only fly these certain missions because they're not good enough.
You're not going to trust them with the tough stuff.
No.
Yeah.
Right? So holding those standards, when you're doing, when you go out to Air Wing Fallon and you're doing those tough flights, that you're briefing it the right way, that you're debriefing it the right way, that we're building a ready room that is capable of taking the knocks and the blows and the tough flights and all those things and taking them in stride because they know how to do it. They've been trained the right way. And when you do that, when people feel like they are doing something special, it's hard, but they feel like, man, we're better at this than anybody. It creates a camaraderie and it creates a buy-in, there. With the and that's with the ready room, and then with the sailors, they've got to feel like they have a voice. They got to feel like they are being respected, that their efforts are being respected. They got to know that you care about them and you care about what they're doing, and they're doing it for something. They're doing it for a reason. They will do anything for you if they know that it's for a reason. If you're arbitrary in what you do, that's the quickest way to build cynicism and toxicity. So I tried to do that when I was a squadron CO, and instead of asking why, I always asked why not.
Why can't we do this?
Yeah, why can't we?
Yeah.
So if
you can answer that question, then you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one of my favorite moments as a skipper was a department head who was awesome. He was my number one guy. He's a workhorse. He was great. And I gave him a task, and it was a hard task. It was a tough one. And it took a lot of outside coordination, and it was hard. And he comes back and he says, "Skipper, we can't do this. We can't get it done." And I said, he said, "This is impossible." And I said, "That's not your job. That's my job to say whether it's impossible or not. It's my job to know what you can do. You go and do it, and I'll tell you when it's enough." And he went out and did it.
Wow.
And it's part of that, setting that environment so people can reach their fullest potential, and you give them the trust, and you push them along because they don't have the experience that you do. Right? You're the
You've
skipper.
seen more. Yeah.
You're besides the master chief, you're the oldest guy there.
Yeah.
You got the most flight hours. You've seen the most things. There was. So we were the last squadron flying Foxtrots in hotels, and the previous two squadrons that had been in the Gulf were flying Sierras. So they had forward-firing weapons. They had, I think, they had Zuni rockets. They had, the works. And we were going out there with just our 50 cal and a 7.62. And if you've ever tried to fire 50 cal from a helicopter, you couldn't hit a barn door.
It's an area weapon.
Yeah.
The rounds are going to go somewhere in that area.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Not precise.
And so I thought, and the biggest threat then was the FAC-FIAC threat.
Yes. In many ways, it still is.
Yeah. So that's that fast inshore attack craft.
Jet skis with machine guns, or slightly more souped up, maybe Boston whalers with missiles.
And you get one of those that's doing 40 knots across the water. You are not going to hit it at all. And they're going to hit you before you hit them.
Yeah.
So I didn't want, this is back to being combat ready, I did not want my squadron going into combat unprepared with the worst weapons. So I created a story about how we needed to improve our weapon systems because the COCOM was used to having these helicopters that are designed for the FAC-FIAC thing. So I sent up proposal up to CAG, and it went all the way up to Airland, to the Second Fleet, for us to have miniguns. So we only had, 6 months to do it before Irving Fallon. So we did. We got miniguns. We got 2 per helicopter. It took 10,000 rounds per crewman to qualify them. Per crewman. We sent our ordnance men out to the factory out in Arizona, it was, that built them.
Dillon Arrow?
Dillon Arrow, yeah.
Yeah, those are good guns.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we, and all the pilots got aero qualified in it. It was awesome, but it was just it was so good for the squadron because the ordnance men and the maintainers could see, shit, man, when we want this, we can do it. And they busted their ass to do it. The crewmen loved it because when you fire that thing, immediately, it's like a laser, and you're immediately on target.
Of death.
It is. It's a laser of death. So they loved it because they feel like they were actually doing something now. And then the pilots loved it because they're like, yeah, now instead of taking a penknife into a gunfight, I'm bringing a cannon. So it upped our game significantly. We did tests with it with the remote control craft, and so we had miniguns at either door. There was a remote control boat on either side of it, and then we ran down between it with the miniguns going off, and they blew up with these mushroom clouds. It was so awesome, both at the same time.
I bet.
And you couldn't do that with a 50 cal or
No. Some of the 50 cals that we shot, I remember I was a divo for the ordnance guys. I swear one of the maintainers said, sir, this barrel was like Korean War vintage.
Yeah, I believe it.
I couldn't, and he showed me, and then I believed it.
Yeah.
And that was what we were still flying. I mean, in fairness, in a 53, if you're shooting back, you're in deep kimchi anyway.
Right.
You're already screwed. But
it's the same with us. If you're in a helicopter and you're shooting back, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to shoot back, I want to have the best opportunity.
And that is the best gun, frankly. Yeah. I have some friends that are, up at Fort Campbell, I'll say it that way, and they love those guns.
I think it's criminal that our Sierras don't have it.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I think the forward firing gun is it's silly.
Agreed. I guess we can leave it at that. Yeah. 3 years in that job?
That was 30 months. So you do 15 months as XO, 15 months as skipper.
15 as skipper. Okay.
Yeah. Another quick story. So we're on COMP2X, so it's right towards the end of my tenure. I was change of command was beginning of February of 15, so this was in January. We're off the Bay Capes. It's Virginia Capes. Nasty black night, and I was doing plane guard, and there was no horizon, so the LSO was asking me to hover about 1.5 miles off the back of the carrier with our lights on, so he would use us as the artificial horizon. So sitting back there, and I'm watching the planes come in, and there's one guy who's having a real hard time landing, keeps on boltering. And then I'm in the left seat, I'm flying, my head's out the window, and I see the master caution just flickers on real quick, just bloop. And I look down, and the guy beside me using 04, Scott Cowick, he said, hey, chick, do you see that? And he says, yeah. And he says, where was the caution light? We had the center panel. And he says, I think it was down here. Well, that's where the tail rotor light was for oil. And I remembered, or a chip detector light. I remembered years ago, when I was flying 46s, a HAZREP from a 60 squadron where the gasket had blown and all the oil had just been squirted out of the intermediate gearbox, or no, it was a tail rotor gearbox, had gone out so fast that it flushed all of the bits of metal from the chip detector, and there was nothing left there, so there was no oil in it, but the light went out, so they thought that everything was hunky-dory. So then they lost the tail rotor, went spinning down, and so forth. So I was thinking, oh man, don't tell me that's it. So I just, for about 1 second, I thought, and I called the boss and said, hey boss, I may have a tail rotor issue here, so I'm going to need to come in. This guy who's kept on boltering, he says, okay, get right behind this guy and I'll take you after him. So I mirror him and I'm flying right beside him as he's coming in, and thank God he caught the wire, Didn't even ask the boss. I just came straight into the back of the carrier, landed, didn't wait for change, pulled everything back. And then the boss calls me down. He goes, "Lucky man, you need to get out and look at your helicopter." The entire tail was covered in oil. So they brought it down to the hangar bay. And next morning, after quarters, main smash chief comes up to me and says, "Skipper, you need to come down and see this." The entire gearbox was just shiny, bright metal. Everything had been totally eaten up. There's nothing left in there. Nothing. So we had seconds. Seconds.
Literally seconds.
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
And I am so thankful that it was me sitting there that remembered that. Because if it could very easily have been a brand new hack who was just like, it's
just flickered. Yeah.
And then they go at a dark night, spinning into the water.
Done.
You're done.
You're done.
Forget it.
Wow.
Forget it.
That's even as skipper, holy moly.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, what was that biggest transition from being a Phrog guy to being a 60 guy? What do you think was the biggest gulf? Because it's two entirely different airframes.
The mission sets.
Okay.
Yeah, it was more than the flying. Flying was flying.
Yeah.
Even with the tail rotor, I was afraid of the tail rotor a bit at the beginning because of losing tail rotor effectiveness when vert repping or something like that. But the more I flew it, the more I realized that it's fine, it's great, it's fun. And the 60 is a very maneuverable aircraft. But I think the mission sets at the beginning, they're so varied and there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I got pulled out of the FRS early, so I didn't do an ASW syllabus. So I went to the squadron as department head. I didn't know ASW. I didn't know the strike syllabus. I didn't know anything.
That's tough.
And because they needed me for deployment. But I found out quickly, and I was talking to Admiral Fitzgerald about this before I went. And I said, I'm a bit nervous going there, all these new mission sets. And he said, Lucky, when you become a department head, they already know you can fly the aircraft. It's about leadership. And when you provide the leadership, the rest of it will come, and they will work with you to make sure. And he was totally right. It's when you're there as department head, you're there to lead.
I feel like that's got to be the pinnacle of anyone's career. But after that, I think there was maybe something in between. But then you came here to Pensacola, and I don't want to shortchange that. Where did you go after being skipper?
So after skipper, I would thought long and hard about getting out because I felt like the Navy, I'd done everything I wanted to do. And then we said, well, what if we can go overseas? My wife had a very good job. She was an executive with CSX Train Corporation there in Jacksonville. And an opportunity came to go overseas. So we went to Belgium, and we worked with NATO.
Wow.
Belgium for 3 years and 3 months.
That is a long time.
Because so the first time in my career, I didn't get picked up for something. So the first look for Major Command, I really wanted a ship. I knew it would be miserable, and I knew it would be really hard on my family. And there was, my head wanted a ship, but my heart didn't. And I didn't want to leave Belgium because we were loving it so much. So I didn't get it, and it was the first time in my career where I didn't get picked for the thing I was going for. But it was okay because I was still like, well, we still got to stay in Belgium. And then second look, then I got picked up for a base, which I was delighted about. And
what a base to get picked up for.
Yeah.
Do you have any choice in the matter? How does that work? They just call you and say, hey, congratulations?
No, they send you a list. So there were 17 bases that were up that year, and then you rank them according to your choice. And they try, for the most part, they try and fit the personalities with where they want to go, and they also try and get you where you want to be. It used to be, if you're a helicopter guy, there's only a couple of bases where they send you, and they were usually not naval air stations. You might get Milton. You might get... You might, if you're lucky, get San Diego because there's helicopters there. You might get Jacksonville because there's helicopters there. But you wouldn't get Pensacola. You wouldn't get Key West or Meridian or the places where a heavy jet presence, Oceana. Now it's not the case. Now they realized that they want to send you where you want to go because guys will turn down command. Because they don't want to go to Meridian or they don't want to go to Corpus or whatever. So, yeah. But there is somebody that wants to go to Corpus.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they try and do that. So Pensacola was up high on my list. Cradle Naval Aviation, all the rest of it. My folks live down in Naples.
Perfect.
So,
yeah.
So I'll never forget, we were driving to buy West Veletran 12 beer, which was ranked a few years ago as the best beer in the world.
Okay.
At this monastery in Belgium, up in Flanders in Belgium. And my wife takes out the phone and she goes, "Oh, the slate came out." I says, "Okay, what did I get?" She says, "Guess." Pax River? No. San Diego? No. Pensacola? Yes. And we were screaming. We were so happy. It was great.
What a way to find out.
Yeah.
What a place in the world to be to find
I know.
out. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
I think there's 3 things you're probably known for, 3 big things that happened here during your time in command.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to shortchange those 3 years because you had a lot more going on.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think, when they think of NAS Pensacola, they think of the Blues, they think of the Great Museum, they think of the airfield, right? There's flying going on. We even have a little Air Force presence there, too. But there's so much more to NAS Pensacola than that. You've got Corps Station that you're responsible for, and you have all the school's commands as well.
Yeah.
What is it? What am I missing? Because I feel like I know, because I work there every day and spend a little bit of time there. But what am I missing? Because you as skipper see everything.
Yeah. So 60,000 students a year go through there.
Wow.
60,000. There's not a college in the United States that has 60,000 students a year. Yeah. Right? Now, granted, we're not doing 4-year degrees, but still. And so there's all the problems that go with having 60,000 students a year. Most of them are 18, 19 years old. It's their first time away from home. The relationship that this base, NAS Pensacola, has with the local community is like no other. No other. I don't care what base it is. The base has been there since 1821. There are so many men and women that are in the history books, in naval history, in space exploration, in government, that went through the halls of NAS Pensacola. There are so many naval aviators who married girls from Pensacola, came back to Pensacola. John Waldron, who was a skipper of Torpedo Squadron 8, Battle of Midway. They lost everybody. The entire squadron was lost except for one, George Gay, Ensign George Gay, who, if you watch the Battle of Midway, the movie Midway, he's the guy in the water with the seat cushion over his head. Really? So he's the only one from that squadron that survived. Wow. John Waldron married a girl from Pensacola before he went on, and she's buried just down the road in St. John's Cemetery. John McCain went through those walls. John Glenn. Bull Halsey was commanding officer of NAS Pensacola. So there's the guy named, what the hell is his name? Bueraker. He was operations officer on the USS Hornet during the Doolittle raid on Tokyo. He was commanding officer of the USS Princeton, that was an aircraft carrier that was sunk. He was the last man off the aircraft carrier. And then he comes to NAS Pensacola to be a skipper. So there's such a legacy there of things of national historical significance and for Pensacola. The first shots of the Civil War were fired at Pensacola. I didn't know that. Yeah, but you don't hear about it because it didn't precipitate the Civil War. Ah, okay. In January of 1861, some Florida militia Confederate troops attacked Fort Barrancas, and they were beaten back by the Union troops there. Fort Pickens, the only federal property that remained in federal hands throughout the Civil War. And Fort Pickens was one of the reasons why the Anaconda project or plan was so successful, because it blocked the harbor. The Confederate Navy was going to use Pensacola as its shipbuilding facility, but it couldn't because of Fort Pickens. Yeah. Wow. It's the control of Fort Pickens is what enabled the Battle of Mobile Bay. Correct. And then the capture of New Orleans and so forth, and then onwards into Vicksburg. And so this little base played a pretty big role. Yeah. In the American Revolutionary War, the British were going to resupply their troops through Pensacola because Pensacola was a British-held town. So Juan Galvez, with a Spanish landing force, landed here and took over the town of Pensacola, blew up the British fort, and thus stopped the British from resupplying through Pensacola. And by the way, his second in command was a fellow named Arturo O'Neill, also known as Arthur O'Neill, who was an Irishman from County Tyrone, who brought a regiment of Irish soldiers fighting for the Spanish, and he was left behind as the first governor of the town after one of the Galvez left to go on to other stuff. You never hear about him, though.
No, not at all.
I talked to D.C. Reeves about naming a pint of beer after him at Perfect Plane, so he said he was going to do it.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
So you clearly have an appreciation for history, and like you said, this place, tremendous history.
Yeah. A tree right outside my house, the skipper's house, on base. The story goes that Andrew Jackson made the plans for storming the Battle of New Orleans underneath the tree. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
It's a good story, though.
Good story, though.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned this when we first spoke. Captain Martin, the person that you relieved as skipper of the base. Skipper is the appropriate term. Commanding officer of the base. I'm always going to be a naval aviator. I'm always going to say skipper. Yeah.
Yep, skipper.
Through a very distant connection, some of his relatives up in Tennessee knew my wife.
Oh, yeah.
And so I remember hearing his name and seeing his name. I was still in Norfolk when December of 2019 happened. So I'd never heard your name, but I remember seeing you on the news.
Yeah.
And before I have you tell everything, I will say thank you, because I remember it was a very steadying presence. I want to say you were in khakis with your jacket on that day, and I just remember thinking, we got someone. I mean, obviously, I have so many folks here that I know, I think very well of in the community, but I knew Pensacola was going to be fine. But that was a terrible day. I stood watch at that desk. Yeah. Every incident Naval Aviation did. That was the first watch I did. I remember, and it was very nice to see someone well spoken, very competent. Yep. Like you mentioned, you had the watch. You were in charge. Yeah. So it was something that I appreciated. I'm sure there's other naval aviators out there that feel the same way. I'm sure there's folks in the community that feel the same way. But I just want to say thank you for that, because I don't think I have up until now. But
thank you. I appreciate that. I was actually in flight suit.
Flight suit, my mistake. Yep. Yes. I'm probably mixing photos. It was very early on that December morning. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind my asking, can you just tell us where were you? Where did it all begin? How did it begin? Because you hadn't been CO. How long had you been the boss at that point?
I took over in March, so this was December.
Okay, so you're in the groove. You know the base. You know the people.
Yeah.
So this is a huge shock to the system, is what I'm guessing.
And first, it was the darkest day of my life, and the weeks and months after that was a very, very dark time for me personally, and but nothing compared to the grief that the families of both the killed and the wounded went through, and they're still living that pain every single day. So there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about them and think about their families, because it did happen on my watch. So that morning, we had a Christmas party the night before, base Christmas party down at the Grand Hotel downtown. So I woke out a little bit of a headache next morning. Not much, just a little bit of one. So I woke up, and the kids wouldn't get out of bed. So I'm a really bad guitar player. I mean, a really bad guitar player. So I picked up the guitar in the room. I picked it up and I went over to the kids' rooms. They're in a bunk bed, and I start playing the guitar and singing, "Get out of bed, get out of bed." And then my phone goes off, and I'm just in the shorts and a t-shirt. And it's my security officer, Steve Picola. And Steve says, "Skipper, we have an active shooter situation, building 633. And for a split second, I just think, we don't have any drills today. And then, but I knew that it wasn't a drill, because I could tell in the tone of his voice. And he says, it appears that we have at least one fatality and an officer down. So then that brought it all to me, and says, "Okay, keep me informed. I'll be right there." So my reaction was to just run out the door in my shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops. But I realized very quickly that I was going to be in the same clothes all day. I was probably going to be on television. I needed to be the leader my people needed. And also, if I go running out the door to the scene, I'm just a idiot running around in shorts and a t-shirt. And my security folks are more worried about protecting me than they are about doing what they got to do. And I trusted them, and I knew that they were doing everything that they had to do. So I know some people were giving me flack because I was wearing a flight suit that day on TV instead of... Well, obviously there are people who have never been in a crisis before. So I threw on my flight suit, or I went over and I shaved, and the process, I always use a wet razor shaving, and the process of shaving slowed everything down for me. It sort of calmed me down a bit. So then I started running through the things in my head, realized that I need to call my boss, the admiral, to let him know. It's like a 5-minute voice report requirement. So I put my flight suit on, And I called my admiral, told him, to his everlasting credit, he just said, "Roger that, Lucky. Keep me informed and let me know what you need." There's no micromanagement, there's nothing. So I go downstairs, and Jen is with the kids in the kitchen making them breakfast. And she says, "What do we do?" And we decided to keep the kids home that day because I didn't want them at school getting all the questions and everything. So I walked out the door, and right when I walked out the door, I realized I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know how many shooters there were. We didn't know where he was. We knew there was one there. I didn't know if there was going to be somebody coming to the CO's house. So I went back and I kissed my kids and gave my wife a hug. Kissed my wife, and then I left. And I went to what we call the Emergency Operations Center. That's down the basement of the headquarters building. And that's where the nerve center, where everything will be. And so it was still pretty early in the morning, and everybody hadn't got there, but they're on their way in. So I was working things as best I could, and my public affairs guy, Jason Bortz, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being and a great public affairs officer. So he was the voice of the base to a large part. I got a phone call. I'm getting updates all the time about what's happening, shooters down, all the rest of it. And we have these radios, but the radio is useless. And I didn't want to be on the radio because as soon as I come on the radio, now I'm blocking transmission for everybody. So that cell phone was everything. All the communications with everybody was all texts or whatever, calling people, whatever it may be. So I get a call that I need to go down to the Building 633 to release the scene to the FBI. Because it's my scene. It's my building. It's my police forces. NCIS kind of works for me. They work for NCIS, but they're, we have a partnership. So it's still mine. So I have to go down, walk it, get a brief, and then turn it over to the FBI. As I was driving there, a couple of weeks later, I was talking to my Master Chief, Mario Rivers, who's also a native of Pensacola, fine American. And I said, "Master Chief, where were you that day?" And he said, "You're kidding me, right?" I said, "No, where were you?" Because everything was a blur. He said, "Skipper, I was right beside you the whole day." And I was like, "God damn it, you were, of course you were." So he was amazing. He was on me like glue. Anything I wanted, he knew it before I needed it. So we were driving to the scene in the command staff car, and he said, "I remember we were driving there, looking over at you, and you were looking out the front windscreen. We were supposed to give a speech. I was going to give a Pearl Harbor speech at Barrancas to some Pearl Harbor veterans that morning. So Master Chief Rivers was in his blues. I was still in my flight suit. And he said, "I looked over, and you were looking at the front windscreen, and your face was white, and you had this look of stone on your face." And I remember that moment exactly, because I was trying to steel myself for what I was about to see. And I was trying to prepare myself to be the leader that my people needed. The person that I wanted to be was to crawl up in a corner and cry. But that couldn't be me. If the people on the base and the people that worked for me saw me being weak and not being the leader they needed, that would ripple through the command like wildfire. So I needed to instill confidence in them. So he did, went to the scene and walked around. It still haunts me to this day. It always will for the rest of my life. It's part of me now, and it's something that it's taken me a long time to come to terms with. But afterwards, I went back out, and all the politicians are there, and our chief of police, he's our senior civilian police officer. He comes up to me, and he just grabs me by the shoulders, and he says, "Skipper, you lead, and I will follow you anywhere." And what he didn't realize was whatever strength I was giving him, he was giving back to me tenfold. Just those words.
That trust.
Yeah. I get emotional thinking about it now. And then so began the very long process. After that, it was one of the largest FBI operations of the last half century. There are over 600 agents involved in it. Because they had to interview so many people all around the country, all the foreign students, getting to the hows, the whys, it is everything, and then answering the questions by the parents that I couldn't give answers to. The media asking questions that I just didn't have the answers to.
Sure.
So my focus was, focus was number one, that people on the base regain confidence so they could go and do their jobs again and get the base back open. Right? We have a mission to do. As tragic as this was, we got to keep the base rolling. It has to happen. Building confidence in the public, that in the town, because some of the people that looked like the terrorists lived out in town and lived in their neighborhoods. And also building confidence in the Navy, in who we are as the United States Navy, that we get punched in the gut. It will take a knee for a second, but we're getting right back up, and we're getting right back into the fight. And the third thing is that I was the face of the United States Navy for that, for the entire nation. So my lines may have sounded like they were party lines, but they were really how I felt, and really I was very, very cognizant of the role that I was playing, and I was very cognizant of the role that I was playing both to the town and to our country, and the role that I would have in a small place in history.
Yes.
So just with perspective, always looking at it through that and being the leader that they needed.
Yeah. And that was something that I remember you mentioned that you spoke to your obviously the admiral,
Mm-hmm.
and you got that support immediately. Yep, here, whatever you need, you tell me. Was that something you found consistently continuing to happen, not even just at that, other organizations like you mentioned, the FBI? I get the feeling there was probably a lot of interest from all levels of government.
Yeah.
It was the story for quite a period of time.
Yes, I was very thankful that Navy leadership left me alone.
Let you do your job.
There were some decisions that I had to make in those first 48 hours. And I felt like I was walking on a legal knife edge. That the decisions I had to make may put me in a very difficult position in the future. That may set me or the Navy up for repercussions later on, without getting too far into details.
Of course.
But I did what I felt was right at the time, and I did what the situation needed and the situation dictated. And I didn't feel the necessity to go back and say, Mother, may I? I just did it. Right? When you're in command, and sort it out, the rest of it out afterwards. Arleigh Burke, when he was CNO, said, any commander that does not push the envelope of his authority is useless to me. And I believe that very much. Command.
Yep.
Do what you got to do to get through the situation, as long as you're doing ethically and legally right.
Of course, yes. You're not going to exceed those boundaries for sure. But
yeah.
That trust, I think that's the beauty of naval aviation, hopefully naval leadership as well. You're given a mission.
And it was leadership, not just naval aviation, but leadership, because most of my bosses were not aviators.
Exactly, yeah.
The 3-star in charge of CNIC, Admiral Jackson, she called me and just a wonderful, just gave me a piece of advice. And she was like, we trust you. You got this, Lucky. Run with it. Vice President Pence called me. Had a very, very profound conversation with him. Whatever you think about that man politically, whatever side of the fence you may sit on, he is a genuine human being who cares about the welfare of the people of this country. That conversation that we had, I think he saw into my soul, and I saw into his. It was very, very profound.
I'm glad we have leadership that that cares, because it's like you said, this is a political thing. I certainly understand that, but at the end of the day, there's people. Yeah. Several people, several families will never be the same again as a result of that. But the best thing you can do, keep working. We remember them.
Yeah.
I know some of our airplanes did the flyover when they reopened the building, and the commemoration. There's a really beautiful memorial there that I don't think many people other than us, Navy folks that can be on the base and see will get to appreciate. Yeah. But we remember them and we move forward in their memory.
Yeah, and I mean that building, just from the it was like the OK Corral in there.
Really?
The firefight. Our folks were the first to respond. I'll just tell you a quick story about the types of things that happened that day. MA2 Barber, young second-class petty officer. She was getting a cup of coffee at the gas station over by the Necks with MA2 Johnson. He was going off duty. She was coming on. She gets a call over the radio, active shooter. She gets in her cruiser, goes over to 633. Johnson commandeers a car just as somebody fill up gas. So it does like the movies. Police business, come there in this car so we could get back to the station, arm up, and get out there. So she's the only one there. She talks to Ensign Watson, who is fatally injured on the steps, and he tells her who's in there. Just that it was a Middle Eastern-looking guy in a flight suit, which was critical. She goes up to the door. She's got her weapon out, makes sure his chamber's around, puts her hand on the door to open it up and go in, and pauses just for a second to steel herself because she doesn't know if she's going to come out those doors in a gurney or walking. But she goes through the doors anyway, and as she opens the door, two police officers, two of our DOD civilian police officers, go running past her, and they go in and they immediately start engaging. One of them ended up getting shot. He got shot in the femoral artery. Barber saved his life. The people like that, right, that go running towards the sound of the gunfire. And then when the Escambia County Sheriff, so they had the guy and then pinned down, Escambia County Sheriffs came, and it was the Escambia County Sheriff that fired the fatal shot. And we have an internal debt of gratitude to the bravery of those deputies that went in. They're so professional. They were awesome. They were wonderful. But right afterwards, senior Navy leadership, and myself included, felt very strongly. So it was about $6 million worth of damage done just from the shooting because of all the bullets flying back and forth. Building 633 was in awful shape, falling apart. So we made a very conscious decision. We're going to get this building back up as soon as possible. So the Navy's got no money for construction, for nothing. So they pulled money from the Naval Academy, from construction projects at the Naval Academy, from all different places to cobble it together to do a construction project on the building. I think it was about a $40 million project. And all they ended up doing was really air conditioning and a few other things. What we wanted to do was to gut it entirely and build a state-of-the-art building, but just didn't have the money to do that.
Yeah.
But it was very important for us to get that building that has such historical significance. It's the soul of naval aviation, to get it back up and running, to show the finger to people that think they can slap us in the face like that.
Totally different kind of aside, but I think kind of related to this. I'm very fortunate. A couple of real good friends or really close personal friends are law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And too many folks, I think, believe Top Gun is the movie, by the way, is the Navy. It's not.
Yeah.
Too many
it's
folks.
more like Hot Shots.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point. Definitely the Air Force, but that's a whole different conversation. I think too many people believe what they see on a TV show is law enforcement.
Yeah.
If you ever have the opportunity to know these folks and someone that will willingly trade their life for other people's.
Yeah.
A friend, I don't think I'm speaking out of school when I say this, the term active shooter has gone out of vogue. They call it active killer. And their policy is go to the threat and eliminate the threat.
Yeah.
The fortitude to do that is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's very humbling to know folks that have done that.
Yeah.
And just like you described.
And that's what we train our Navy security forces to do. You hear shooter, you go. You go. There's no standing back. There's no waiting for backup. You go. And we do not pay these people enough for them to do that.
Yeah.
But they do it anyway.
I don't think that day will ever be forgotten, but I don't think it also, like you mentioned, it didn't end in one day. It was kind of a long-term thing. Mm-hmm. When only followed up thereby shortly thereafter by March of 2020. So this is December of 19, March of 2020, and the world changed in a big way then as well. How did it affect NAS Pensacola?
Like 60,000 students a year coming through there. So how do you maintain that, all that training and keeping that pipeline? Because if you think the Navy is about 340,000 people, and if you stop 60,000 people a year getting trained through there, that's catastrophic to the naval aviation enterprise. So it has to keep on happening. So there was a lot of work to keep that pipeline going and to do it safe. And the COVID numbers on the base, I mean, I was so proud of the people there, were minuscule compared to out in town. But we could control it a lot better than town could, and we didn't have the politics that were going on outside the wire.
Okay,
and that was a big difference.
Yes.
The amount of folks that chose not to take the vaccine are minuscule. So it was easier. It wasn't easy, but it was easier for us to control it.
Sure.
People had to do what we say.
Yeah. Yes.
But I tried to also, I understood too that you've got all these kids that are living in the barracks, and if we just hold them up in the barracks, they're going to go stir crazy. So I tried to leave things open that we could do safely and that I wouldn't get slammed for by my leadership.
Yeah.
So I was skirting that line as much as I could. So I left the boats open for as long as I could until I got my, slapped for doing that. The golf course I managed to leave open, but you could only be one person per cart.
But it still works. It's getting people outside.
Yeah, get them outside.
It's
kind of funny but not funny if you were there. The beaches, I wanted to leave them open. And I asked the tenant commands, please police the beaches so we don't have people down there. So my house overlooks the bay, and just the way the acoustics work, I hear people down the beach up there. So I'm sitting there on the porch having a glass of wine with my beautiful wife, and it sounds like it sounds like Daytona Beach and Bike Week. So I'm like, oh man, I gotta go down and see this. And so I drive down, and the beach, Barrancas Beach, is nut to butt. It is. They're bumping and grinding. There's the music going. They're pouring beer over each other. I mean, it is nuts. It is because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah, they're trapped.
So I called security. I'm like, I hate to do this. Guys, we need to clear the beach.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't.
A photo gets taken, gets shared.
I don't even care about that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
It's more all these students. It would shut down our training pipeline.
Yeah.
Right then. We just couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Of what it would do to the entire enterprise.
Yep.
So from a business perspective, you just couldn't do it. It was too much of a risk.
Can't. Yeah.
So then I go back up to the house, and they walk back to the barracks on that path in front of my house down my Redford Boulevard, and it was like the Bataan Death March. They're walking back with the coolers, boombox on their shoulders, and they're all sad, and their shoulders are down. And I'm like, "Yep, I did this."
Not a great day.
Yeah. But and then right then a couple months after that, we lost Vinny Seegers in a plane crash. So he was the commanding officer of Schools Command, and his one of his XOs, or one of his department heads, Wits.
In Alabama, I think. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. I actually believe, for those that read Flying Magazine, I think there was an article just came out kind of describing a little bit of what happened there.
Yeah.
Very illuminating to hear more, because at the time I only know very little information came out when that happened.
It looks like in the oil sump, the filter in the oil sump, just that little screen there.
Yep.
Was just completely blocked, and it had been in for service, but only the filter had been checked and cleaned, and that screen had never been cleaned, and It was completely clogged with carbon buildup, shavings.
That engine was failing, rather.
Yeah. And it threw a piston up through the whole engine block, up through the cowling. And then it developed into a fire.
Yeah. And a fire in a small aircraft is...
forget it.
Yeah, terrible.
Forget it. Yeah.
That
was a tough one.
And then, on that, we come to the hurricane.
Yeah.
Sally.
Yeah.
Tell me about Hurricane Sally.
So, hurricane... whenever there's a hurricane coming towards a base, we do briefs every day, sometimes twice a day, with the Navy Weather Center up in Norfolk, all the weather guessers. And so we're getting constant updates, and we're talking to leadership all the time, and we're preparing the base for it. So we were ready for it. It's funny, the Skanska folks tried to subpoena me to testify, because in the paper I said, afterwards, I said this hurricane was a surprise to us all, meaning the ferocity of it was, and we didn't expect it to make that right turn. But
no one did, yeah.
So they tried to say, well, the captain was surprised by it, so how would you expect us, just this little old company, to be? It's like, no, dude, we were prepared for it.
Yeah.
Just, there's
a difference.
There's a difference. When you go to combat, you're surprised by the ferocity of the combat. Doesn't mean you're not prepared for it, but you're surprised by the ferocity of it.
Of course.
Same with we were prepared for the hurricane, but we were surprised by the ferocity of it. So it took that right turn, and it sat right over us. And me and Jen, I remember we went to bed that night, and a couple hours later, the bed was shaking for all the wrong reasons. Not the reasons you want it to shake for. It was banging off the wall, and the whole house was rattling. The house was built in 1906, and it sits up in a bluff. And there was water pouring in everywhere. I thought the ceiling was going to fall in. Attic windows had busted out, and so water was coming in sheets. Next morning, as it's easing up, our youngest, Charlie, comes down, and and he's rubbing his eyes, and he goes, "Hey, what's for breakfast?" I was like, man, oh, to be that age.
Focused on the right stuff, I'd say.
Oh gosh! So when it's passed and they could get out of the house, my heart broke. Just the state of the base. It was $550 million worth of damages to the base, and the two houses beside us were almost completely destroyed. The house right beside us, the house right beside us, the roof was partially ripped off. The one beside that, there was a family living in it. Two girls are upstairs. The parents were downstairs. They hear all this banging. Mom runs upstairs, and the entire roof was lifting up off the house and slamming back down again. That's what the noise was. So she grabs the girls out of bed. Roof lifts up, slams down. The whole front porch collapses. They're so lucky. Their living room ceiling collapsed. Just all their stuff was ruined. It was a time, but all the people that needed to come in that next day, and this is 80% of them civilians, they all came in to work. People with trees through their living rooms, cars flooded. They found a way to get to work. They found a way to get to the galley so that folks would get food, to keep the electricity running, to keep the water running. So that happened on a Friday, and Monday we were open for business. Albeit in a very fragile state. And I did mission essential personnel only for a while because all the traffic lights were gone. There's power lines down still, but we could take aircraft at the airfield. All the essential services were up and running. And in hindsight, we did it too quickly because senior Navy leadership then didn't see a demand signal for help. So as all the official NAVFAC comes down, that's the Navy Facilities Engineering Command, and they do all the assessments of the buildings, and they're the ones. They're like, yep, $550 million worth of damages. We had 28 football fields worth of blue tarp on the roofs that are still there.
Yes.
And senior Navy leadership, about a year later, we're trying to get money for it. And senior Navy leadership says, well, you're just not showing us enough of a demand signal. That you're not showing. The word was you're not showing enough pain.
Really?
Are you kidding me? Because we were doing our job so well.
Yeah, that's tough.
Now, eventually, we did. We got a supplemental in Congress of some money that they're working on now to try, and I think it's going to change the face of the base for better. They're going to
really,
yeah, they're trying to get some of the money turned into Milcon money so they can tear down some of the old buildings and build new ones. And really, it's my last year there. Worked very hard at trying to set the base up for the next 50, 60 years. Because if we just keep on putting Band-Aids on stuff, it's the same stuff again.
It's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
What a conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not showing enough
Not showing enough pain.
Not showing enough pain. I'm sorry.
Not showing enough pain. But that's how it works up there.
That
Because
is
there's
how it
so
works.
many, and it's what I go back to that before. What I said about people in the Pentagon, the thing that will surprise you is that there's so many good people working up there trying to do the best they can, but there's so many demands on them that there's just so few places where they get to really make a difference or do good.
Yeah. You look at a place like, Tyndall after, I can't even remember the hurricane in 2018, and that place was flattened. I mean, there's no question in anyone's mind that would be, I would assume, billions of dollars worth of damage. But yeah, I mean, you look at the base and there's still those scars, and you don't even have to look that hard in some cases.
See, the Air Force doesn't have ships they need to send to sea. They don't have piers. And the Air Force is much better than the Navy at getting money like that.
Very good point. Yeah.
They got a lot of money very, very fast to do that. They're very good at that.
Yeah. Looking back, say day one, Lucky taking the job as the base commanding officer. What would you tell him? What advice would you give? I mean, not knowing the things that you had coming in terms of the specific events that probably defined a lot of your time here, but what would you say? Because I feel like with the benefit of time, I don't know, it helps. It helps give perspective. Is there anything you think that day one commanding officer when you took over, what do you think would help to know?
Pace yourself. Yeah, I didn't understand that. You hear it's a marathon, not a sprint. But I like to get, like when I see something wrong, I want to fix it and I want to get it done. I took on the whole education system here in Escambia County.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. I'd probably be like, dude, take a chill pill for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, and this is, or I alluded to earlier on, when you're in a crisis, anybody that says to you, hey man, I hope you're looking after yourself, they've never been in a crisis before. Because you can't look after, if you're looking after yourself in a crisis, you're not looking after the problem. You're not looking after your people. You prepare for a crisis. You look after yourself in a crisis beforehand. And you prepare for it by making yourself whole. So everybody's got a bucket of joy that they carry around with them. And you have to be filling that bucket of joy all the time. Because when you're in a crisis, you're going to take, and you're not going to put anything back in. And at the end of that crisis, that bucket may be beyond empty. There might be a hole in the bottom of it. It's going to take you a long time to fill it back up again because of what you've been through. But if you don't know where you get that joy from, then the next crisis you have, you've got to be a lot less resilient than you were before. And I found that as I was going through these crises, each crisis, my tank would hit empty a little bit quicker than the one before it. I didn't spend enough time, and it has to be deliberate and it has to be conscious, doing the things that brought me and my family joy. And that isn't just spending a day with kids. That isn't just going and playing around at golf. You got to look for those things. So like happiness is buying that new set of golf clubs. Joy is when you hit a perfect 4-iron to 2 inches, right? Or happiness is when you buy that beautiful 1988 Porsche that I still regret selling to this day. Joy was you're on that windy road and you're downshifting when you come into the apex and you just punch it coming out of the apex and you feel the car hug the road. So what are those things that bring you joy? And it shouldn't be dependent on other people, right? Because your family, too often we use our family as a like that becomes the only thing in our life that brings us happiness and joy. And if that's the case, then you're actually burdening your family because they're going through all their crap as well. And I found that I was leaning on my wife unfairly. She was my fence to lean up against. She was my gatepost that I could just rest up against. But she was also my psychologist, and that's not fair. She's there to love you. She's there to support you. But there's only so much that they can do, right? And the same with your children. I found myself sometimes getting short with the kids, snapping at them, exhausted when I came home. And it took me, after the hurricane, I think I came pretty close to having a nervous breakdown. I was driving home. We had to move off base because our house had to be repaired, so we had to move off base. And luckily, some dear friends let us use their condo in Perdido, which was, it was just, our youngest said, we are going for a walk on the beach every evening. And I'm so glad he did that, because every evening we did. And it was so wonderful just to do that after all that stuff. But there was stuff going on with the shooting, and the Navy was about to make a press release about the shooting, and it was wrong. It was that the facts were wrong. It was placing blame where blame shouldn't have been placed, and it was in direct contradiction to the FBI and Navy reports. And I was furious because of what it was going to do to the people it was blaming, what it was going to do to the base, and what it was going to do to the wider community. And I called up the Admiral, and the Admiral was like, hey, lucky man, it's like a safety investigation. You just got to take it. And I was furious. But what I didn't realize is that the Admiral hadn't read. I was the only person that had gotten in the CNIC and on the base in our chain of command that had read the Navy investigation, which was crazy. So I was furious, and this was going to get released, and I was like, I developed a bit of a relationship with the Secretary of the Navy, and I was going to, whether I was going to or not, but I was sort of spooling myself up to call the Secretary of the Navy, because that was the only way where I could bring attention to prevent this from happening. And like, it's going to cost me my career, it's going to cost everything, but I can't. And I was driving into the base, and I just started breaking down crying. I was so frustrated, and the weight of everything, the weight of the previous 18 months was just, it was crushing me. And I mean, it's all of this. It's the how I felt about the grief of the families of losing Vinny, of what was going on with the base, and us not getting enough support. It was all the crap going on with COVID. It was all the residual stuff from the shooting, and then I just had enough, and I just broke, and I realized that I need to talk to somebody. So the CEO of the hospital, a friend, and I call him and say, hey man, on the down low, can I go talk to somebody in mental health? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I did, and I ended up seeing him once a month for a year. And it was, I couldn't have done it without doing that. It was so important to be able to just flush things out, things that were weighing me down, and to understand what was going on inside my own head, because I'd never given myself the opportunity to, what none of us on the base did, had the opportunity to process anything that had happened to us during that time, because it was punch after punch after punch. And if you don't take time to yourself and to do those things that give you joy, you're not going to have time to process all that stuff that's going on. And I didn't do that well. Like, we'd go on little trips every now and again and get the family, but it was family time, it wasn't Tim time. And you need Tim time, you need Lucky time.
Yep. From the outside, you made this look effortless. And that might sound like a trite statement. There's a lot going on. I literally cannot begin to imagine. I appreciate you telling this story, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
All I know is it looked like Pensacola, NAS Pensacola kept getting punched over and over and over and over.
I haven't shared this. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and that was the first time I shared it, and I couldn't share it earlier on because it was too raw. And I thought, I used to write the articles for the Pensacola News Journal.
You did, and I wanted to ask about that later. Yeah. Yes, sir. Which are wonderful, by the way, and I still go back and read some of them.
Oh, really?
They're still on the website. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Totally different conversation, but yes.
So I wanted to. I was going to write an article about mental health, about my journey, but I didn't want to do it as the base CEO, because that would detract from me being the base CEO, and I struggled with it because I knew the power of doing that as the base CEO. But I had a job to do, and I didn't want anything to detract from the job that when you're a military commanding officer, no matter what personal feelings you have, no matter what's going on, your number one job is, like I said before, it's the combat effectiveness or the mission of the base.
Up and out. You're looking at it for other people.
Yeah. So, and one of the things, I talked about this to the doc. He would ask me about vulnerability, and I'm a fairly vulnerable guy, and I think that's why, without tooting my own horn, I think that's why people can relate to me, because I don't mind being vulnerable, and they see that you're human, and they can relate to it, and it's good. But to a point, I could be vulnerable to a point, and then it would start detracting from my job as a leader. But in that, I didn't give myself grace. I would give other people around me grace, but I wouldn't give myself grace, because I'm the skipper, goddammit. So somehow, whether you give yourself grace in private, I wouldn't do it in public, but in private, and I wouldn't even do it in private. And it's learning how to do that, and that is a learned skill.
Look out for one another.
Yeah.
Try to think, and this isn't a Navy thing, this isn't a military thing, this isn't an aviation thing, but try to know the folks in your life. Try to talk with them. You would be surprised what people can deal with, and it looks effortless from the outside.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Empathy is so important. It seems like it's something that we're missing these days. Empathy and grace.
Yep. If you're thinking about others and not thinking about yourself, I think it becomes easy to do. It's part of your natural life. But so many people are not focused on others; they're focused on themselves. It's easy to do.
It is, and it's in the journey when you're responsible for anything, you are always going to do the right thing if whatever it is that you're doing, you are doing it for the benefit of your organization and the people. When you start doing it for the benefit of yourself, that's when you go off the rails.
Yep.
And it's as simple as a DUI, right? You get a DUI because you know it's wrong, but you're lazy, or you think that it doesn't apply to you, or whatever. It's all about you. If you are sleeping with the help, right? You're a skipper and you're sleeping with a young junior officer or enlisted sailor. You're doing that because it puts you on a power trip.
Your ego. It's about you.
Yeah,
yep.
Makes you feel good. So anytime you're in a leadership position and you're making decisions based on how it makes you feel, you're wrong.
What I think was right, though, is what you did when you shared your perspective with the community. How long did you write those articles? What was the genesis of you? Did you reach out to the Pensacola News Journal? How did that begin? Because I think it turned into something really awesome, which was a perspective from your desk that no one else would otherwise have had.
Yeah.
Why did it start? How did it start?
So after the shooting, and I called it a shooting, but it was a terrorist attack.
Which I think, and by the way, I read this in a book recently, it is the first terrorist attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. I don't know if you count Fort Hood. Fort Hood. So I think technically it'd be the second after Fort Hood, depending on...
It was the first and only terrorist attack perpetrated by a foreigner on a U.S. military base.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is a tremendous deal, is a huge deal.
It's huge.
Which I don't think people necessarily appreciate that.
Yeah. So afterwards, part of those three things I said I was focusing on, the confidence of the people on the base, the confidence of people out in town, and us being the face of the Navy. I needed to reach out to the community to continue that dialogue with the community. So I asked Lisa Nielsen-Savage, who's the editor of the PNJ, I said, hey, would you give me just a little bit of space for me to write a thank you letter to the town? And she goes, oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, sure. Seriously, send it to me. So I wrote a letter to the community of Pensacola, and it was the entire front page. I thought it was going to be in the back, just a little column, and it was the entire front page. And the response was, back to her, was overwhelming. And so she said, there's a lot of interest in you keeping writing. Would you be interested in it? I said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. What will we write about? And she said, it's whatever you want. Happens on base. And so I talked to Jason, my public affairs guy. He was like, yeah, that's awesome. That's really valuable real estate. So we agreed to do it. And at first we thought it would be just happenings on base or something like that. And then I realized, no, that is a waste of real estate on that paper. This is a way especially at the time of COVID, this is a way for me to communicate to the people of Pensacola, and it's a way for me to strengthen the bonds, or at least keep that bond active between the base. And I'm by no means the senior guy on the base, but I am the face of the base. And when people think of NAS Pensacola, they think of the commanding officer. It's funny, like people in town think that everybody on base works for me.
I was going to say, I'll tell you a little secret. I didn't know we had an admiral at one point.
Yeah.
You are not the highest ranking person on the base, but you
Yeah.
are the face of it.
Yeah. So I started writing it, and I write, when I try to make a point or when I give a speech, I try and do it in stories, because I don't want to preach. When you preach, you lose people right away. And when you get your point across through stories, it captures people's attention, it captures their imagination, and it allows them to look at something with a different perspective. So I try to write about things that were forefront of my mind, or in national politics, or whatever it was, in a nonpartisan way that was my viewpoint and it was my story. So I had to there's a fine line there, because some of the things I wrote about were the Navy wouldn't touch, but I wrote about them in a way that ensured that I wasn't taking sides in anything. So I dealt only in truths. For example, for Black History Month, I wrote an article and I told a story about how in Northern Ireland, to this day, only 12% of the schools are desegregated. In Ireland, desegregation means Catholics and Protestants. You will never change a society until people from multiple different backgrounds, demographics, and ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds are growing up together. And it's in Northern Ireland, if you are a Protestant, you may not meet your first Catholic until you are 30 years old in the workforce. Even though that's a small place. And it's the same in our society. Because our children don't go to school together, we don't worship together, we are stovepiped in so many different ways in our society. We have pockets of integration, like social integration like that. But we all sort of stick to ourselves, and some people are warehoused in some places and some in others. And I used the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, to talk about how, and the solidarity movement in Poland, how deeply affected they were by the civil rights movement in America. So the American civil rights movement has affected civil rights the world over, and we don't think about that. So when you get folks that are thinking about Black Lives Matter or whatever, and they dismiss it as just this new movement. It's been a continual movement since abolition, since the abolitionist movement. And it has affected the entire world in a very positive way. So that's, again, telling a story to help people realize that it's bigger than just here. It's bigger than Montgomery and Selma. It's the world over. It's everywhere. Or at the height of COVID, everyone's miserable. Everyone feels like they can't take it anymore. My favorite soccer team is Liverpool, and their slogan is "You never walk alone." And they've been doing terrible for years, and then they won the league a couple of years ago. And so I wrote about that and about you never walk alone and how it's solidarity and we're all together and that sort of thing. So trying to do it from those. I wrote about the George Floyd murder, called it what it was, as a murder, which my public affairs guy was like, hey, do you really want to be touching this? I'm like, you have to. You have to.
Can't ignore it.
No.
Yeah.
You can't just look at all the people that work on this base
Yeah.
that are deeply affected by this. You can't just sit there and stick your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't happen. But you can talk about it in a measured, deliberate, truthful way and relate it to the fundamentals of what it means to be an American, about the things that bind us together as Americans that are written in the Constitution. When you focus on everybody's when you focus on what makes us different, it's called tribalism. And we're devolving into tribes, political tribes, social tribes. When you focus on the things that bring us together, it's called a community. And we have gone from communalism to individualism. And it's been a process since after World War II with consumerism in the 50s to the distrust of government after Vietnam, to the social downturns of the 70s and the 80s, the materialism of the 80s and the 90s, and then being 20 years in war by a tiny minority of the country and everyone else not really caring because it's not them. So it's not the Democrats, it's not the Republicans have done it. It has been a continual American movement that somehow we need to reverse. Sorry, I just sort of went off.
No, not at all. Thinking about other people. I think that's what at the end of the day, thinking about more than yourself, more than. Yeah. Change of commands, or was it the museum? I know yours was at the museum, at least on the backside, because I was on the base here as an instructor.
Yeah.
Where we had quiet hours that day, so we made sure we didn't make too much noise while y'all did your thing. Standing in that atrium, probably a big moment, I'm guessing. You retired that day too, correct?
I did. Yep. That was a retirement ceremony anyway.
End of your naval career, how many years?
33.
33 years. Wow.
Yeah.
That is a heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
33 years, and then you're handing over command of the base.
Yeah.
Again, the gem of naval aviation, I would say, where we all start.
Yeah. It was a day of reflection. It was very much a day of reflection. My speech was about sunrises, all the sunrises that I'd seen, taking off from the deck of an aircraft carrier and flying into a sunset or sunrise. Getting home and lifting up. You feel like collective rise, and the wheels break the deck, and that flight going home, and you know your family's waiting, and it's just not quite sunrise yet. And as the sun's coming up, and you haven't slept the night before because you're so excited, and you see the coastline, and you do that formation flight over the field, and you see all the family members down there, and then you're circling in and landing and turn the engines off and putting the rotor brake on and getting out of the cockpit, and then the kids are let loose and they all run across the tarmac. So just all those times are standing on the bow of the Enterprise, coming out of the Suez Canal, going up into the Straits of Messina, and after just 4-5 months in the heat of the Persian Gulf, and the sun's rising right as we're going through the Strait of Messina, and you look over to Sicily on one side and the toe of Italy on the other, and you can see the smoke rising as folks are lighting their fires, and you can smell the bread, and you can smell the coffee. It's such a even talking about it, it's just so visceral. I can smell it now. And the sun is just rising, and you're so just happy, and the cool breeze is coming over the bow of the carrier, and you're just so happy to be alive, and you're so happy you're on the way home. Sunrises have always been just a time of hope for me, and it was kind of, yes, this is my career is sun setting, but I'm seeing another sunrise because it's another stage of my life that I'm beginning, and that's very much how I felt. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't feel sadness. I felt excitement, joy, very content that this was 33 years that made me who I am today. But they have a place in my life, and that's where it belongs. And now this is something new that I'm moving on to. It was time. It was right for me.
What is that thing that's new? What are you doing now?
I am the director of the Center for Leadership at University of West Florida. Brand new Center for Leadership. They hired me to create it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a compliment.
Yeah.
What does that job entail? What's the day-to-day like for you?
Right now, it's all the big muscle movements. So I'm really getting to know the environment up at UWF, building consensus on it, doing a lot of the just the initial stuff to get it going, and looking at places where we're going to house it, building curriculum. I'm not in academia, so there's other people there, like the assistant dean. We're going to have an executive MBA with a focus on leadership. We're going to be doing leadership seminars. I want it to be a engine or a forum for societal change here in Pensacola to help move the needle on education, housing, homelessness, you name it. Just using that, because I believe in corporate responsibility, social responsibility. So we need to be doing that there. We're going to be teaching that. So I've got big plans for it. They may be pie in the sky. I don't think we'll ever be at Harvard, but we can reach for the stars. And on the way to the stars, I think we'll learn a lot, and just some magical things might happen.
I agree. I always like to end these by giving the guest the last word. Anything I didn't ask, anything you want to say? It's truly, I guess my last words, I'll say, truly an honor. Thank you for taking the time. This is really, everyone's naval aviation experience is different. Mine is incredibly short compared to yours, but it's such a privilege to hear these stories, truly. So thank you. I just want to say thank you for that. But
thanks, bud.
I want to end it on your terms. Anything I didn't ask or anything you want to say?
Gosh, I know we've talked about a lot here today.
Yes, sir. 3 hours and a little bit.
Was it really?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're 3 hours and 7 minutes.
Good God.
It's almost 7 p.m.
Good God. I guess it's just what's really on my mind now. There's a book by David Brooks. He's a columnist for the New York Times. And he wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And it is all about, once you have reached the pinnacle of your career, what are you going to do afterwards? What is your second mountain going to be? And the most meaningful second mountains are those ones that you climb. They're the ones that really make a difference. You're climbing the corporate rung, corporate ladder to begin with. You're in the military. You're always trying to get to the next rank or whatever it is. And then once you've gotten there and you've gotten that validation that, okay, you're pretty good at whatever it is you do, that second mountain is the one then where you usually feel free to do the things that mean the most to you and are going to make the biggest difference, because you've already gotten the satisfaction of whatever it is that you're doing before. And I really feel like that's what I'm doing now, what I'm trying to do. This position as a director for Center for Leadership at UWF, it's really, I'm so thankful for it. I am so humbled that they would approach me as to do this. They're taking a big leap of faith in me to do it. It's my vision. It's they're allowing me a creative process to do it, and they're supporting me to do it. But it's giving me a platform, I think, to try and do some real good in the greater Pensacola area. At least that's my hope. And they're the things that matters. When you, in my 3 years at the base, the thing that I'm most proud of is that we started a STEM Academy at the National Flight Academy. So now every single Title I fifth grader in Escambia County spends a week of STEM, robotics, coding, you name it, they're doing it there. And the spark that will hopefully give to those kids to show them that learning can be fun and what the art of the possible is. I mean, that's life-changing stuff, Working with Dr. Ed Meadows at Pensacola State College, we collaborated to start a charter high school in Warrington. And it's going to be a dual enrollment high school where kids can graduate high school with an associate's degree. And then you can go straight into Florida, University of Florida, as a 18-year-old. That's the life-changing stuff, right? And that's the stuff that I'm most proud of because of the impact it'll have on young people's lives. So it goes back to what we're saying, what are you doing to be useful? Are you useful? Are you value added? And if you're not value added, what the hell are you doing? You're just using oxygen.
Can't end it any better than that. Lucky, thank you again.
This was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. It was good talking to you, pal.
Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.